Go into regular session. It's 6:06. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And I see some young people here. Can you lead us in the pledge, guys and gals? Go ahead.
Ready? Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, guys, very much. We have Spanish translation available. Dr. Sarvis?
Sandra Trujillo is here to translate for us tonight.
Thank you. Good evening. Buenas noches. Mi nombre es Sandra Trujillo y soy la intérprete para la reunión de esta noche. Si alguien necesita ayuda con la interpretación, me puede venir a ver. Voy a estar localizada al fondo del salón. Gracias. Thank you.
Good.
We have headsets for the hearing impaired if you need them. And Dr. Sarvis, introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions.
Good. At our meeting on January 12th, I spoke to you, Board, about a very generous and special demonstration on the part of our students, Kids Helping Kids, the event at Granada Theater. I'm delighted to welcome San Marcos High School's advanced placement economics teacher, Jamie DeVries, and some of his students who raised $140,000 for the Unity Shop, signed a major recording artist, and had 1,600 people in attendance at the Granada Theater. Jamie, would you please come forward with your students? This is an incredible student-run, student-organized, and student-inspired event, and I'd like our teacher and students to tell us about how this project came to be and what it means to students and to the community. Mr. DeVries?
Well, thank you very much for having us here. We're deeply honored that you're taking the time out. I couldn't be happier to be these kids' teacher. And at San Marcos, we really value giving back. And many years ago, I was tasked with the obligation of teaching economics. And I think these students will attest they've probably done more econ graphs than any other students in California probably. And at a certain point we thought, what if we can do something with all this textual graphical analysis? What if we can do something? Because I don't know about you, but I remember from my college days, the classes that I felt were most valuable were those in which we felt like we were applying what we were learning. So with that in mind, we thought about well, what if we can give back to our community? And I'll tell you this right now. I know our district has some really tough choices, but if you're looking for some fantastic fundraisers, the kids standing behind me today, you might want to consider hiring them. But without further ado, I'm deeply honored to be the teacher, especially of, well, all my students, but these two here with me today, Mr. Scott Hempy and Shelby Zylstra, I think have put more hours in and more late nights and more weekends than any students I've seen in many years, and I'm so privileged to introduce them. So I'd like for them to actually tell you a little bit about what we accomplished.
So I'm Shelby Zylstra. I was elected CEO last year as a junior by last year's seniors who took part in Kids Helping Kids. So last year I just followed them around, just watched. I wasn't a part of doing anything last year, just watching what they were doing. I was pretty worried because I'm not naturally gifted at econ or math, but what was really cool is that I was learning econ through Kids Helping Kids, and it really made econ totally come alive. That was really cool, and it was neat to see that what we were learning in the books was directly applying to what we were doing. We were learning about maximizing total revenue and minimizing average total costs. And we were seeing directly through Kids Helping Kids that we were using this knowledge that we were learning out of the book to help what we were doing and to help meet our goals. Specifically, we learned about the spillover effect, and it really helped us decide our ticket prices. That was something that we thought about for a while. In all three classes, we talked about it, which is 100 students, if I didn't mention. We talked about it, and we discussed how in the book we were learning about the spillover effect, and it really helped us price our tickets. So just a couple examples of how econ really came alive for us through Kids Helping Kids. What was really neat for me to see is that it wasn't 10 people doing 90% of the work. We were 100 students, and so many people contributed in so many different ways, various backgrounds, various interests, people from all groups at the school, all sports at the school. So we put on this benefit concert through all of our efforts at the Granada Theater. We set our goal at $125,000, and I am so proud to say that we exceeded our goal, and we're at $140,000, like they said. And we added to the Kids Helping Kids total of over $380,000. So that was really exciting for us this year. But although we put in hundreds of hours, we could not have done it without of the generosity of the community. So Scott's going to tell you more about that.
Like she said, the community and the businesses in the community were a huge part of everything that we pulled off about a month ago. Specifically, several companies that helped us out a ton in various ways were Deckers Outdoor Corporation, was our corporate sponsor for the last 2 years and helped us out so much, and many thanks to them. The Chumash Indian Tribe, West Covina Nursery, Cumulus, who aired several promotion commercials for us, Cox Cable as well. QAD and the Santa Barbara Music Academy helped us out in giving us advice on our pitch for fundraising to the various companies. And these businesses helped us out a lot, but it was more than just that made us accomplish our goal. It was the community that felt what we felt and understood our mission of raising money for the community and giving back to the community we grew up in. And that's what truly allowed us to succeed. It was you guys coming to our car washes, our boutique sales, our restaurant nights, various Got Talent competitions, singing competitions at several different high schools, buying raffle tickets, live and silent auction items. Several teachers came out the night of the event. Administrators were there to show they believed in us, and even Dr. Sarvis was there to give us his support. It was through a community and a school district such as ours that allowed us to fully fulfill our mission and our goal. Next year's Kids Helping Kids is going to take it to an entirely new level. I'm sure they're already meeting and discussing what went well and what went wrong. And it's definitely going to continue on in the future with the support that the community provided. We aren't here to tell you what 100 AP Econ students did, but what as a community we accomplished this year. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you pick up a copy of our fiscal solvency plan and come back with your recommendations? Okay. And if you want to tell all the other 98, they can see your presentation at 5 o'clock on Saturday night on Channel 18, and they can judge you accordingly. Thank you very much.
Very nice, and it was a great concert. Well, shall I go on with the superintendent's report?
Yes.
In the days ahead, there will be 2 meetings to discuss the draft proposal on honors coursework in our secondary district and relabeling the GATE courses. The first meeting will be held for GATE parents on Thursday, February 18, at Santa Barbara High School's cafeteria. There's a flyer in the back if anyone's interested in this, and board members, you have a copy of this as well. The second meeting on Monday, February 22nd, will be for parents, students, and staff. The meeting will be held at San Marcos High School's cafeteria from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. That's p.m. A flyer.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I thought there was one at the Globe Theater.
There was going to be one at the Globe Theater. That has become the, that's not a group meeting. That's the steering committee for GATE advisory.
And we wanted a larger venue.
Okay, we need to let the news media know because it's been publicized
Oh,
as a
has it
parent
been
meeting. Yes.
Oh, good. There you go.
Mr. Kuznia?
Well, Barbara's on it now. So we have the information on our district website, and there's a flyer in the back. We expect to have the Spanish translation available tomorrow, so we'll get that out as well. We just finished the flyer. Yesterday, QAD and Murray Ray of QAD presented Franklin Elementary School with a $24,000 check. The grant is to be used for computers in each classroom. There was a lot of enthusiasm at the school. This is Diversity and Equity Awareness Week at our junior high schools. The high schools will hold their Diversity Awareness Week next week, and some of the schools are including Disabilities Awareness Day in their activities. Next Monday morning, February 15, Dos Pueblos High School's Engineering Academy will host officials from Raytheon who will be on site to meet students and staff, tour the academy, and present a donation check of $175,000. Board members, if you would like to attend, it's 11 o'clock on February 15. This is the Academy's first national corporate donation. The $175,000 donation means that the capital campaign has passed the $2 million mark and is well on its way to completion. In fact, Dave Hetjunk will be putting out bids soon. Right, Dave? No. As the board knows, we have to hit a 75% level, and as soon as we do, we put the bid documents together, we go out to bid, and usually by the time we actually award the bid, we're much closer to that goal. Next week, there will be a free talk by education reform advocate Jeffrey Canada on what we can do to help every child succeed. Mr. Canada is the author of Whatever It Takes, and board members, I believe you all had copies of that book. He's the creator of the Harlem Children's Zone, a pioneering nonprofit organization that works to enhance the quality of life for children and families in some of New York City's most devastated neighborhoods. He will be speaking at the Marjorie Luke Theater at Santa Barbara Junior High on Wednesday, February 17 at 8 p.m. The event is free. Following his inspiring talk, there will be a panel discussion with local leaders, and that panel will include our own Emilio Handel from McKinley School. He's a principal at McKinley School, and Mr. Canada will have copies of the book available at the meeting. It's a great book. I think most of you have read it. The board brief. My office regularly issues a report to the board called the Board Brief. It's a collection of reports and news items about the district. A copy of the January 29 board brief can be found in the foyer or in my office. The January 29th board brief included two items I'd like to bring to the board's attention. First, the district's Professional Development Week flyer highlighted 16 different training opportunities for teachers in June, and we'll be adding to that. In fact, you'll hear in the next couple of meetings about it, some other items we'll be adding to that list. The board also saw a letter pertaining to the secondary district's general obligation bonds. I am pleased to report that Standard & Poor's reviewed and affirmed the A+ rating and stable outlook, quote unquote, stable outlook of the bonds. The letter constitutes Standard & Poor's permission for the district to disseminate the rating to interested parties. Upcoming events. Kids Draw Architecture, which features selected children's drawings from sketch sessions held at McKinley Elementary School and La Cumbre Junior High School, are on display in the Channing Peak Gallery located on the first floor of the County Administration Building from 8 to 5 on weekdays. San Marcos High School's Royal Blue Review Talent Showcase is on February 18 and 19. Dos Pueblos High School's Jazz Festival is on March 6. The district's String Festival, not Spring Festival, String Festival, is coming up on March 17. Goleta Valley Junior High School's Advanced and Beginning Band, Orchestra, and Jazz Ensemble Concert will perform on March 25. And you may visit our website, shown on the board, for more information on school events. That's it for the superintendent's report, but I do believe we have Kevin Davis here from Dos Pueblos. Kevin, are you here? Dos Pueblos student report? How about another student from Dos Pueblos? No. Kevin is not with us tonight.
Okay.
I thought I spotted him in the audience. So we'll invite him back to our next meeting.
Thank you. I should note Dr. Noel is not here tonight. He is not feeling well. C2, board comments and correspondence. Mrs. Parker?
I know there were many wonderful things happening last week, including Music of the Night at Santa Barbara High. The one event that I was able to get to was the All-District Honor Band for each level, elementary, junior high, and high school, which was at the Luke this past week. And one of the things I wanted to note was last year we could see a really dramatic difference in the quality of the elementary honor band because they'd been doing the twice a week after school Bravo practicing. This year, for elementary in particular, it was not just the quality, it was the size. It's now the size of the junior high honor band. It's dramatic, and it's just going so well. So I'm pleased to be able to say that elementary music feeding into junior high and high school honor bands, which were all terrific. Just great the direction we're heading in on that.
All right, thank you, community.
Mrs. Deacon?
On Thursday, I attended the internet safety discussion and I know Mr. Heron, you were there as well at Santa Barbara Junior High in the Luke Theater. It was a great turnout. I was really impressed with how many people came. A very lively presentation, some good questions by parents. So I think it was very worthwhile. And I certainly know I talked to my kids not long after that. Of course, they're young adults, but at any rate, it was very useful, and I'm glad we did it.
I went to that seminar and immediately went home and checked my history and saw for sure. I know exactly what I looked at for months at a time. I never knew that existed before. It's a good thing for parents to know about with their children because you can go in and you can see every website they've looked at or anybody's looked at that computer going back in time. It's an eye-opener. I also had the pleasure of going to Santa Barbara Junior High at their achievement barbecue. Over almost half the school had all A's or B's and qualified for a barbecue. And they had it out in the quad. It was a beautiful day, loud music, a little bit of impromptu dancing. But the parents put on the barbecue, and it was parents and teachers, and it was really quite something to see. And then I did notice over the weekend that a couple of our high schools did very well in the math bowl. I figured exactly. I know San Marcos had a 4-man team that did very well. And one of the others, Dos Pueblos had a team that did very well. So we were well represented in all those categories, which was nice to see. It's good to see all the good things that are going on. Any others? Mrs. Cadero?
I just wanted to remind, I had brought in some flyers at our last meeting that the Santa Barbara High School Dawn Snack Cafe and Virtual Enterprise is about to start their voluntary income tax assistance program that's open to the community, and they service just a huge number of families without charge to file their income taxes online, which is and they do it for Spanish-speaking families, for anyone in the community, and so I just want to publicize that a little bit more because I'm not sure that all of the people who could be taking advantage of it know about it.
And I noticed that those flyers are gone already. There's more information on our website, or people can go directly to Santa Barbara High School or even contact the school, call the school to find out more about it. It's a great service.
It's amazing year after year how our high school students are doing tax work. It's fantastic.
And
Okay.
e-filing.
Yes. C3, announcement of closed session action. On B1, nothing to report out. On B2, a motion was made by Parker, seconded by Deacon, to approve the compromise and release agreement for case number 50241772212 in the amount of $250,000, and the motion passed unanimously. And nothing to report out on B3.
May I add to that the unanimous vote was 4-0 with one board member being absent.
Thank you, Dr.
Good.
Sarvis. Public comments.
Yes, we have, I think, 13, maybe 14.
Okay, we have 14 public comments. There'll be 2 minutes each, and Mr. Cordero will call your names. Up to 2 minutes each. You don't have to use 2 minutes.
Okay, so Speaker slips are now closed for public comment. I'll give you a 30-second warning. Michael Thrasher, followed by Cynthia Pereira. I apologize. I may be skipping ahead. Yes, I'm looking at the wrong file. Sorry.
Mr. Thrasher, you can sit down. You were hoping to get out early. Okay.
I picked up the wrong stack. It was Catherine or Kate Smith, followed by Ken Locke.
I'm sorry, you have to call the name that's on the speaker's list.
Catherine Ann Smith, followed by Ken Locke.
President Herron, I'm going to complain that there is somebody who is not the mouthpiece, as you are, who cannot read.
She's called Catherine.
She called me
And-
Kate Smith, but why is she not able to read what's on the slip?
Mrs.
Ms. Smith, would you like to take the podium?
Yes.
Your time is beginning.
No, you can't start my time yet. President Herron, members of the Santa Barbara School Board, this month, the United States Congress will pass the Prevention of the Use of Restraints and Seclusion in Schools Act, a result of the May 2009 congressional hearing that found over 200 children had died at school, and not one school employee was found accountable. My daughter's landmark lawsuit was a result of retaliation for our allegations of physical abuse of our special needs daughter. Bonnie Switek had me arrested under a statute that allowed her to call the police on child molesters, pimps, and drug dealers. The statute specifically stated that parents of children at the school were not included. When I called Debbie Flores and said, "This is false arrest," she said, "So sue us." So I did. To justify the arrest, I was
Sorry, 25
accused
seconds.
of using a handgun. I'm now going to produce the handgun and do exactly what it was that I said. Get me a gun! This is my hand. That's the gun. I performed this across the United States.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Kenneth Locke, is Kenneth Locke still
There's
here?
the handgun.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Locke. Followed by Claudia Mazzotti.
We have only 2 minutes or 3 minutes?
2 minutes.
My name is Kenneth Locke. I just spoke before the city council today, and I did a video and put up on YouTube. It's called Tennis Intelligence, which I brought up to them. I mentioned in the video that the basis of what intelligence is, and I used Roger Federer as an example of somebody. He's the #1 men's tennis player in the world, say. And when his investment into his relationship with tennis, it didn't pay off in relation to him becoming intelligent. I'm sorry to say that that relationship, as I kind of mentioned to you before, the concept of competition and capitalism, it actually limits a person's intelligence. When it comes to tennis, if I asked you, how intelligent do you think you could actually become through a relationship with tennis? A lot of people don't know. They don't even consider becoming intelligent in relation to tennis. What I'm claiming to be is the first tennis player to actually to kind of become intelligent through tennis and understand the integration of the mind and body, the concept of holistic, commonwealth, common knowledge, and also when it comes to the arts, what does a person actually, intelligence, how, there's no painter like
30 seconds.
there's like a Andy Warhol. He wasn't intelligent, and it's funny to use these guys historically as examples because again they weren't intelligent. And what I claim to be is witnessed an enlightenment through the philosophy of aesthetics and can kind of explain the meaning of for why we had the abstract art movement. I'm hoping that this stuff is embraced, and I'm hoping that somebody within the school board could make contact with me and a dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Locke. Claudia Mazzotti?
I would like her to go first because she can give the antecedents of my
Okay.
cricket.
Okay. Cricket Wood? Okay, Ms. Wood, followed by Claudia Mazzotti? Okay.
I have some packets to give to you. Can I do it at the end of my 2 minutes? Okay. Okay, good evening. I'm Cricket Wood. I'm a parent at Monroe Elementary School and the PTA president. I'm here today to represent parents from Monroe Elementary who are opposed to the recent decision to terminate our Mastery Math program. We believe it's a strong and successful program that can be modified if necessary to meet the concerns the district may have. Given all the information that we have on the situation, we believe Mastery Math can be implemented without eliciting compliance issues. We've collected information from the California Department of Education that it's okay to use standard-aligned, unapproved supplemental material such as Mastery Math, and that it's a local school district decision whether or not to use these materials. Monroe's currently using the district state-approved Envision Math curriculum, and Monroe has been using Mastery Math as a supplement to 4 different core curriculums over the past 28 years. We believe that Mastery Math can and should be used as a supplementary program alongside Envision. We realize that fitting in a proper number of instructional minutes required for the programs with Mastery Math has come up an issue. The director of our program of Mastery Math has stated she believed the program could remain functional if reduced to a few days a week rather than daily. And we're here seeking your support in being able to continue to provide this beneficial program to our students at Monroe. Monroe is a very diverse community and school, and we believe that the Mastery Math program addresses that very well and has supported it very well at our school. So I'm going to
Thank you, Ms. Wood.
give each of you a packet we prepared.
So,
We have a single packet of signatures, letters from parents at the school. We did not make 7 copies.
thank you.
So, there you go. And there's
Okay.
Thank you.
And while we're collecting those, Claudia Mazzotti, followed by Alec Flores.
Good evening. Thank you for letting us be here tonight. I'm a mother at Monroe. I'm an engineer, and I've been working with math since I was 16 years old. You do the math just looking at my face. And I really want to support the program because I've been helping these students at Monroe 4 years ago, since 4 years ago, and I've been working with the disadvantaged kids. And it's the first time in my life that I see children learning math in the way they have to in order not to hate them at some point in their lives. So the experiences I have had with these kids are really fantastic. And I really believe in the program, not only because I have children there, but because I saw other kids benefiting from it. So I will appreciate very much, in the name of many other mothers, if you consider to keep the system for the benefit of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mazzari. Alec Flores, followed by Lizette Nunez.
My name is Alec Flores. Mastering math should be kept. Some reasons it should be kept are mastering math encourages children's interest in math. For many students, it is a fun way to learn math. 3, it helps children learn math at their own level and pace. 4, if a math terminal is too easy, they are moved up. If it is too hard, the child is moved to an easier level. My brother is a second grader who wants to keep mastering math because it's fun, educational, and makes me smarter. Makes everyone happier because better math equals a better world. Helps you be creative with your mind, and so people can have a better world. Children are our future, so give the best schooling possible to make a better world for everyone.
You made it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Flores. Lizette Nunez, followed by Beatriz Flores.
Good evening. I am a parent of 2 children that attend Monroe Elementary. As a parent, I value a program that allows students to be able to work at their own pace. Offering a specialized math program gives them the opportunity to remain focused on any subject until they have fully understood it completely, as well as allow children to proceed with the next subject once they have mastered it. To me, this program is an ideal situation, which tends to be unavailable to most schools, either due to lack of support or resources or belief in any particular program. But Monroe has successfully carried this program for over 25 years, and my son loved it. He loved it and was very disappointed, my second grader, with the cancellation of this program, as were many other students, as you can tell, as well as teachers and parents. I feel that the loss of this program would eliminate the advantage of working in smaller individualized groups, leaving a number of children in the dark, either left behind because they don't understand fully any particular subject, or children that might be bored or uninterested at a certain point. I urge Monroe and the school board to reconsider finding a way to keep mastering math in one way or another. From what I have heard and seen, it is an incredible program that Monroe students have been lucky enough to be a part of in the past, and I'd
30 seconds.
I'd love to have the opportunity for my children as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Nunez. Beatriz Flores,
Good evening.
followed by Jack Flores Pina.
Good evening. My name is Beatriz Pimentel Flores. I'm a mother of 4 children in the school district. One is a 7th grader. The other 3 are Monroe students who all adore math. They love math, and I attribute it specifically to the program at Monroe. It challenges the children who need to be challenged. It helps with remediation, those children who need remediation. It encourages them to the point where they love doing homework, think that math runs the world because that's what they're told at school, that's what they see. It's a program that can be aligned with our state standards. Penny Ridgway has said that it can work. She can make it work. Instead of having it 5 days a week, we can do it maybe 2 or 3 days a week. Encourage the kids, keep it going. If there is a program that works, it shouldn't be discarded. It should be looked at, and it should be kept going, especially since it's my understanding that children who have gone through that program, English learners and native English speakers, all do better than many other children in other schools. Mastering math works, and that needs to be considered. You have children who are in elementary school here speaking on behalf of the program. My 7th grader quoted my 2nd grader saying that it's fun, he likes it, and it makes his mind more creative. If you have a 2nd grader so passionate about that, that's something that all you really need to consider. He couldn't be here because it's past his bedtime. Please truly consider keeping this program that can be aligned or is aligned with our rules and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flores. Jack Flores Pina, followed by Jennifer Scarborough.
I'm Jack, and I'm a student in 5th grade at Monroe, and I think we should keep mastering math because it helps the people that are behind to be better at math, and the people that aren't so good at math get better at math, because the new math system, it's only one thing, but in mastering math, there's multiple teachers teaching multiple subjects, and mastering math is really fun. And like my brother said, it does make you be more creative. And I think it's a good math program and should be kept.
Thank you, Mr. Flores Pina. Jennifer Scarborough, followed by Daniel Richmond.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Scarborough. I'm also a parent at Monroe of a 5th grader who is, he came into the school from a private school where they did not test math, and it was taught very differently, and yet is strong in certain areas of math. It is amazing how Mastery Math has filled in the gaps. It has helped with any holes that he has had in math, and I've seen this with lots of other children. It's a wonderful, and I don't want to even call it a program. It is a wonderful vehicle to help whatever program is in place. It has helped all the programs that have been in place for 28 years. So it is something that supplements. It is a technique. It is a vehicle to get instruction to children that can go perfectly with the Envision program that we have. And it is an incredible program in the sense that it really is diverse and it meets the diversity of the school. I also am really opposed to how the program was stopped. It was stopped right before Christmas with very little warning, at a time when parents didn't have a time to rally. Children were not given a fair explanation. So you have a program that was in place for 28 years. A decision was made maybe a couple of weeks before Christmas. I actually didn't get the note that went home with my son, so he just came home one day and said, we're not doing Mastery Math anymore. I think that he probably lost the note. But anyway, somehow it was a note that came home. Children should be given much more of an explanation. So I am here for more than one reason. I'm here because I want to save the program. I want to save this
25
for
seconds.
the future. But I want to let you know that it was not appropriate how it was handled, and I think that we should have an extension until the end of the year to work on anything that needs to be worked on to make this work. And last, to give a voice to the children. You know, they can lose respect for a system that gives them no fair explanation for why something was stopped. These children were stopped mid-terminal. They were not given a chance to even finish what they were working on. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll rally behind us.
Thank you, Ms. Scarborough. Daniel Richmond, followed by Daniel Gay.
Hi, I'm Daniel Richmond, and I'd like to talk about the proposal to modify the GATE and Honors programs. And I am all in favor of combining the two programs. I think that that's a good idea, and I think that you know, it certainly is possible that many children feel that the GATE label makes, as I think it was put, makes the program inaccessible, or makes them feel that the program is inaccessible. But there was another proposal, which was to, I believe it was something, it was called to raise the percentage of underrepresented groups in the GATE and Honors programs. And I am all for ensuring that everyone has equal access to these programs, but at the same time, I don't think that simply taking some students who may not have any desire, any drive to learn, and placing them in a program instead of other students who might be more interested in it is the right way to go about things. So I think that that combining the programs is a great idea, but I think that we should employ the existing system of testing students, of having teachers' recommendations, to identify those students who are most interested and most driven to learn and to do well in these programs, rather than saying, you are part of an underrepresented group, let's give you a more basic assessment and then put you in the program, simply to say that we have increased underrepresented students in the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond. Daniel Gay.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Daniel Gay, and I am a 9th grade student at Dos Pueblos High School. Also here to talk about the possible combination of GATE and honors classes. And one of the reasons why I am partially opposed to this is that it could lead to the homogenization of classes. At the moment, we have 3 levels for college-bound students: the college prep level, honors level, and GATE level. When you have it split up into the 3 levels, it means that the teachers can concentrate on students of a smaller range of abilities. Now, I'm sure everyone in here can remember the days back in, say, elementary school in which the class moved as quickly as the student who was struggling the most. And that it would make it a lot easier for the teachers and for the students if you prevented those gaps so that you could provide what is most important for the students, which, if you look at your mission statement that you have up on the wall there, you have you want to ensure the educational success of all students through high expectations and a commitment to excellence. And if I understand that you are trying to help some of the students that are possibly represented less, but it should not be done while taking away from the students who need more. 30 seconds?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Before I go, I would like to read you a quote quickly. "You cannot help the poor by destroying the rich. You cannot strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. You cannot bring about prosperity by discouraging thrift. You cannot lift the wage earner up by pulling the wage payer down. You cannot further the brotherhood of man by inciting class hatred. You cannot build character and courage by taking away people's initiative and independence. You cannot help people permanently by doing for them what they could and should do for themselves." Abraham Lincoln has been dead for 150 years, but I would say his words are still true today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gay. Chris Grant, followed by David Holmes.
Can I wait until everyone has a...
I'm sorry. Yes, you may go ahead, Mr. Grant.
Okay, thank you. I analyzed some of Dr. Sarvis's data from the meeting last week and went and looked at the Direct STAR test results from 2009 and wanted to share a little bit of what I found looking at the artificial barriers to GATE. When you look at the advanced section for English proficiency, or advanced proficiency for English language, you see that there's a real strong correlation between that and the students who are actually in GATE, both for Latino Hispanics and for Latino non-Hispanics. It's almost identical for the non-Latino Hispanics. So what you're seeing here is a very, very small difference between those who are advanced and those who are in GATE on both ethnic boundaries. There's very little artificial barrier, or what I call a gap, to getting into a GATE program if you're a high advanced English language arts person. But there is a little bit. So I asked myself, should any of those students that are in the advanced category not be in GATE? I went to the state level testing and found out that of the advanced folks, 21% of them are advanced for English language arts. GATE is really set for about 5% of the top learners. So you would think that about 25% of the advanced category would be in GATE, which means we've got a lot of kids in GATE who are advanced but not really GATE qualified. We're not addressing the special needs of the GATE student.
30
what we've really
seconds.
got is a strong, strong honors program. And my concern is that by opening the floodgates and letting a lot of people in, we're either not going to be able to address those needs, or we're really going to burn out the kids who are trying at levels way above them, and they're not going to be able to succeed. Quickly, next graph just shows that about 5th grade, we're losing our advanced students. They're dropping about 75% of advanced from 5th grade down to high school. We've got to do something more to stimulate these students. Thought I had 3 minutes, so next
Sorry.
week I'm going to give you page 3. I don't want to just criticize you, but show you there's a tool, a method out there that really addresses how to get students who are Hispanics, 50% Hispanic, and low income. They're below grade level in a year. They're acting above grade level and getting 97% on their proficiencies.
Thank you, Mr.
I
Grant.
left you an article. Please read it, and I'll share it with you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Holmes, this is the time where you would address an item on the consent agenda. So you would like to address item D5.
Thank you. David Holmes, Santa Barbara Teachers Association Executive Board. I'm speaking on D5, the approval to apply for this Department of Education grant, only for this message that this grant, you know, you're going for some federal money, and we have to be really careful that in going for this special funding, we don't inadvertently change working conditions for our certificated staff. We have to be careful of that. That is a negotiated item. It's interesting to read this grant proposal as it's spelled out. It seems to affect the psychologists pretty much predominantly. I would caution the board, or not caution the board, but ask the board to direct the staff to make sure that conversations are transparent and open and inclusive of the experts that you have currently in the field of the psychologists. They are your experts, and if you bring in a new program or an adjunct to the program, we ought to allow them input and serious discussion about how this might change the working conditions of the psychologists in our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. That concludes public comment.
Mr. Herron, we'd like to give you some very brief information on Mastery Math. If you'd like more information, we could put it in the board brief, but I'd like Robin Swaski, our Associate Superintendent, to comment briefly on it.
Can I make one comment
Sure,
first?
go right ahead.
Just for the audience, you see us up here listening, and you won't hear us do much talking. And that's because this is not a agenda item. So we really can't discuss in public or at all something that's not on the agenda. But I want to assure you, we listened to what you said, we heard what you said, and I will have Robin give a little response, but you're not going to see a lot of dialogue on it. We can direct the staff to bring it back at another meeting, and I don't know if we'll do that or not, but we'll hear Mrs. Swaski.
Thank you, and I'll be brief because I did a board brief just recently on Mastery Math, and what the speaker said is true. It is a non-approved program, if you will, that can be used as a supplemental program to our Envision Math. The real problem is, and it's not something we can use the program, but it has to be supplemental. Envision Math takes an hour. It's a standards-based, research-based program, and to implement it with fidelity, all the pieces have to go together. Otherwise, the research doesn't make sense. So it has to be an hour, and I know there's no contention there. That's fine. Finding the time in the day for Mastery Math, and I guess there's a proposal maybe for 3 days a week. That's really a site level, and you know, the principal, Brent Mulholland, and the teachers can work with that. We're not opposed to that, and I don't believe board members necessarily are either. We encourage supplemental math, any kind of supplemental materials that can help students. So that the board brief, and particularly at Monroe with math, and that was my ending piece, is that the site is very targeted in math. They missed their target last year in math, and so if they don't meet it this year, they'll be in program improvement because of math. So what was going on in the past wasn't helping all kids to the degree in which they were meeting the targets, as other schools in our district have. So they're very clearly looking at math, and I'm sure they will make the best decision.
Anything else? Okay, so you heard a very loud and clear message right there. Right. Well, we can't have a discussion. Okay.
We will be happy to talk with parents at a later point, though.
Okay.
My name is Robin Sawaski. Extension 210.
Thank you very much for all of you.
Thank you.
C5, acceptance of donations.
Move to accept with gratitude.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried 4 with 1 person absent.
I just wanted to especially thank our young students who stayed and commented on this item. We appreciate that.
Okay, item D, the consent calendar. Are any items to be pulled?
Did the board note the 2 revisions on items D2 and D5? They're in wording only, I believe.
I had one question on D9. I don't know if I can just ask it. Maybe you have the answer. D9 is the personnel actions. The youth outreach worker is on here starting January 1st, 2010. That just seemed a curious date to me, and I was wondering if anybody could tell me why.
I can actually tell you, or Elaine, actually when the board originally approved it, you only approved it through December 31st of '09.
Okay, thank you. So nothing to be pulled? All in favor?
Move
That's a
to
motion
approve
first.
the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried 4 to 0 to 1 absent. Okay, let the fun begin. E, conference agenda. First reading of fiscal solvency plan, phase 3, number E1.
Well, we set the agenda for this a number of months ago, and we've been preparing the board by way of interim budget reports and reports on the state budget proposal. And tonight you're hearing the first reading of the fiscal solvency plan, and Eric Smith, our deputy superintendent, will be delivering this report.
Thank you, Dr. Sarvis. In October of last year, the board directed staff to develop an accelerated time frame for making budget reductions for the 2010-2011 fiscal year. This timeline included the following: a first interim report and multi-year projection as of December 15th at 2009, and at that time to identify an amount that we would need to cut going into the 10-11 fiscal year. A report on the governor's budget for 10-11 in January, and an adjustment to that figure if necessary. A first reading of the fiscal solvency plan, in this case phase 3, on February 9th of 2010, and a second and final reading of the fiscal solvency plan phase 3 on February 23rd, 2010. The board's initial theory was that if we got in front of cost reductions, hopefully we could minimize the amount of over-noticing we do with certificated staff. However, since the budget cycle at the state level starts in January, is revised in May, and sometime is not concluded until September or October, that may or may not occur depending on the adjustments that are made through the legislature during that period of time. The attached fiscal solvency plan represents our best thinking at this time with regard to expenditure reductions in the unrestricted general fund for the fiscal year 2010-2011, starting with initial figure of $5 million. Based on the governor's proposed budget in January, we've ratcheted up that figure to $6 million, and that might not be the end of it this year. So what I'd like to do is walk you through the introduction, then the assumptions of the plan, and then the items identified in the plan. As you know, our goal is to try to ascertain a $6 million budget reduction figure, and I'll start with the introduction on page 1. On January 6, 2010, Governor Schwarzenegger delivered his State of the State address in which he pledged to protect public education from another round of devastating budget cuts. 2 days later, the governor unveiled his budget plan for fiscal year 10-11, and that pledge was nowhere to be found. The governor proposes an additional $2 billion in cuts to public education for the fiscal year 2010-2011, and this is how it will directly affect us. For revenue limit districts, which we remain in revenue limit for the secondary district at this point, but we should be transitioning into basic aid for next year. An 18.335% deficit for the revenue limit still exists. This means that revenue limit school districts are receiving approximately 81 cents of every dollar that they're entitled to under the normal revenue limit formula. A cost of living adjustment. Unlike last year, the governor proposes to fully fund the statutory cost of living adjustment. Unfortunately, the COLA is a negative one, actually a minus 0.38. So through the normal operation of law, by fully funding the revenue limit COLA, it actually results in a further deficit to revenue limit districts. About $23 per average for elementary districts and $28 per ADA in secondary districts. A revenue limit reduction, another $1.5 billion, which includes $1.2 billion from school district administrative cuts, which I'll talk about later, and recaptured savings of $300 million from the elimination of barriers to contracting out. Staff estimates that this calculates to an additional $191 per ADA to the elementary district and $231 per ADA cut to the secondary district. Since both districts will be in basic aid, we will not take the full brunt of those cuts, but they will manifest themselves in what we call the fair share reduction, which is a mechanism that the state initiated last year so that basic aid districts actually take some kind of fair share reduction as well. Where that will be applied to will be our Tier 3 and Tier 2 categoricals. At this point, the calculation is 5.81% of our undeficited revenue limit entitlement. Based on these additional cuts that are proposed to revenue limit districts, we anticipate the 5.81% will increase. To what level, we have no idea. So given that what we know right now, we estimate at least $6 million in cuts. That figure could be revised based on the May revise, which is actually released generally on the second Monday in May. So we need to get to work. And by getting to work, we'll start with the actual plan assumptions in the document. If we move to page number 2, I'm going to read these plan assumptions because I think they're essential to reading the plan and also identifying what's included and what's not included in the plan. The cost savings identified in this document are based on the following assumptions. That total compensation for an average teacher is $85,000, but for replacement purposes, we've estimated total compensation of $73,100. Classified personnel total compensation is calculated at the actual cost of the identified position. Estimated cost savings have been rounded. Cost savings are identified as ongoing unless explicitly identified as one time. For the purposes of the plan, expenditure reductions and revenue enhancements are both construed as cost savings. Only the cost savings to the unrestricted general fund are quantified, even though some cost savings may accrue to the restricted general fund. Cost savings are identified by district. Cost savings that are not identified by district pertain to jointly funded expenses and are assumed to be split 70% secondary and 30% elementary. The plan already presumes that there will be a reduction of approximately 3.6 certificated full-time equivalents respectively to account for declining enrollment in fiscal year 2010-2011. Certain items contained in the plan may be negotiable and require the cooperation of our employee associations to implement. In the event that the board approves of these recommendations and staff fails to negotiate their implementation, the board will need to adopt additional measures to reduce expenditures and or enhance revenues equal to the dollar value of those items that could not be negotiated. Education Code Section 35110 entitles the district to report their financials combined. However, the Santa Barbara County Education Office requires that each district demonstrate that it meets the 3% recommended minimum reserve level. As such, cost savings have been identified by district. No Measure H or Measure I funds are used to offset expenditure reductions. However, it is anticipated these funds are being charged indirect cost rates as was originally contemplated in the development of the measure. Revenue limit and state categorical deficits are applied in accordance with the School Services of California Financial Dartboard, normally considered the industry standard. Our first section is budget craftsmanship and revenue enhancement on page 3. The first issue would be a reduce routine restricted maintenance account from 3 to 2%. State Budget Authority last year gave districts a 5-year window where we could actually reduce restricted maintenance from anywhere from 3 down to 2 to 1 to 0. Although we've traditionally resisted doing this, we're at a wall. So we're proposing that a reduction take place in the routine restricted maintenance account in each district. Basically, as you know, when we did the one-time reduction plan to offset the $3.4 million, we identified a placeholder in the secondary district that was a significant amount of money. If we did reduce the routine restricted maintenance account from 3 to 2%, it would actually be a total savings of $1.2 million, with $360,000 attributed to the elementary and $840,000 attributed to the secondary district. It would result in a reduction in force. We don't have those specific numbers at this point in time. Depending how that was played out, it could look a variety of different ways. Eliminate funding for crossing guards, item B. In June of 2009, the Santa Barbara Police Department notified the district that due to the city's own budget crisis, it would not be able to provide funding to operate the crossing guard program for the 9-10 fiscal year. In August of 2009, the board authorized the administration to negotiate a memorandum of understanding with the police department for crossing guard services and appropriated $112,000 from the unrestricted general fund. We strongly believe that this is a public safety function, and if not entirely shifted back to the Santa Barbara Police Department, a negotiation to take place where they actually pick up a portion of the cost. If we could get them to basically accept having the burden of providing crossing guards, a financial burden of providing crossing guards shifted back to the PD, it would be a savings to our unrestricted general fund of $112,000. Item C, shift expense of transporting students from program improvement schools to non-program improvement schools to Title I Part A. During our analysis of the parent pay program, it was noticed that a significant number of elementary students who reside in attendance areas of program improvement schools are being transported to non-program improvement schools. Staff proposes that the district use Title I revenues to fund the transportation costs for all inter-district program improvement transfers. Title I Part A requires districts to provide students enrolled in program improvements the option to transfer to non-program improvement schools within the district and paid transportation. And they also provide a pot of money to actually fund this transportation expense. By doing that, that would be a savings of $75,000 in the unrestricted general fund. Item D, reduce telephone expense at 4 elementary schools due to implementation of Voice over Internet Protocol, VoIP. The elementary district will receive federal E-rate funds to provide Voice over Internet Protocol at 4 elementary schools. By replacing telephone lines with VoIP, staff anticipates that it can be an ongoing reduction in telephone expense of $12,000 per year in the elementary district. Bid contract for waste hauling services, item E. The secondary district budgets approximately $150,000 annually for waste hauling. These services are currently provided by haulers operating under the City of Santa Barbara franchise, or actually the County of Santa Barbara franchise agreement. However, the district has statutory authority to contract directly for waste hauling services. We actually have bid this, and we will be bringing the board an actual bid to award, and the amount is at least a $33,000 savings in the secondary district. Recognize revenue from inter-district students from revenue limit districts of residents attending charter schools. Education Code Section 47633 requires the superintendent of public instruction to apportion 70% of revenue limit districts' base revenue to basic aid school districts that receive inter-district students into charter schools. We've reviewed the enrollment data of students from revenue limit districts that attend district charter schools, and I've identified 25 ADA. This is roughly an ongoing savings to the elementary district of $85,000. Recognize State Allocation Board waiver of unused site fees for Hidden Valley and Tatum sites. As you know, we are assessed unused site fees from the State Allocation Board for the both the Hidden Valley and Tatum sites. We applied for a waiver as of January 27th. That waiver was actually on the State Allocation Board. We're waiting for the notification that it was approved, but it was proposed and agendized for approval. That's actually a savings of $44,798 in the elementary and $79,000 in the secondary, for a total savings of $123,798. Item H, charge associated student body accounts indirect cost rate. Last year, staff attempted unsuccessfully to charge the ASB bookkeepers at each site at the 3 comprehensive high schools for a portion of their salary and benefit costs. Since ASBs do impose additional costs on the district office in terms of their impact on the district's functions, it's appropriate that they pay an indirect cost rate. And let me give you a smattering of the things that we do on behalf of ASBs. Purchasing and accounts payable. Certain ASB expenditure purchased and paid by district office. We process year-end 1099 and do the reporting of sales and use tax. We assist ASBs with equipment leases. In accounts receivable, we do invoicing for all ASB payroll costs, other expenditures processed through purchasing and AP. Payroll, all ASB payroll monthly processing, year-end W-2 processing. Personnel, all ASB employee processing and approvals. We take those to board for approval since they don't have the staff to do it. We review all ASB fundraisers. We review all ASB donations, and we take all of those to board for approval. With respect to the general ledger, we collect monthly statements and add cash reconciliations. We follow up on missing statements, reconciliations. We collect and review annual budgets, information forms, and internal control checklists. We budget journal entry revisions. At year end, there's a collection of annual financial statements, annual cash reconciliations, follow up on outstanding items per external auditor's recommendations. With respect to facilities and equipment, all ASB meetings are held on district property. ASB facilities are maintained by the district office. ASB trainings held on district property. All manuals are produced on and using district equipment. ASB data and Santa Barbara School District intranet maintained by IT staff. Reporting of certain ASB expenditures through district office financial system. Our Director of Fiscal Services, internal auditor, review all the ASB meeting minutes for approval of employee board approval forms, process requests for certificates of insurance, process forms related to vehicle purchase and use, process authorizations to be absent for ASB trainings, review of annual budgets and internal control checklists, follow up on numerous deficiencies and budget questions, creation and uploading of ASB manual, creation and training of ASB required forms, site training on the manual, individual site meetings trainings as requested by sites and deemed necessary by district office employees, support all ASB questions, review all SAB contracts, research invoices, contact with the state, meeting with sites, ensure all proper liability coverages are in force. We create manuals, basically deal with the frequently asked questions, update the FCMAT manual. In our annual year-end audit, we have 3 weeks of field work, including ASB's gathering of data, responding to auditors, creation of corrective action plans for ASB material weaknesses, site training on implementing corrective action plans, and the external auditor requested internal audits of ASBs at sites. So just to give you an idea, it's
which is a little more than we do for categorical programs in general, for which we charge indirect cost rate.
And I would just like to address, I know the board received an email with respect to indirect cost rates and how they're charged. Indirect cost rates, the way the methodology works is prescribed by the California School Accounting Manual. It's always against total expenditures. In some cases, certain categorical programs exclude capital outlay, but you can't cherry pick. You can't say, well, I only want you to apply indirect cost rate to my 1s, 2s, and 3s because, I think the rest of the program, doesn't impact or impose any burden on the district. That's just not the way it's done. With respect to the legitimacy of charging an indirect cost rate, our internal auditor actually verified that with FCMAT. And I think the person who wrote that letter forgot that I used to work for FCMAT. So I found it particularly offensive. So if we actually looked at applying an indirect cost rate on all the ASBs, it would generate at 4.74% against total expenditures about $188,950 in the secondary district. Moving on.
Do you want to talk about an alternative?
What?
I think at this,
Or maybe that's obvious.
Well, at this point, we're just going through every item.
Absolutely. I think the board's well aware that, you know, we ended up placing a moratorium on charging the SB bookkeepers a proportional share of their salary and benefits, as well as not imposing any student fees on student parking, which was subsequently usurped by a couple of ASBs. But I put the people on notice that those might come back for board reconsideration, and you know, there's going to be some proportional distribution of cuts, and the ASBs are probably going to have to share in some respect. While it is true that ultimately the student bodies would have to approve any expenditures, it's also true is that the ASBs exist at the discretion of the board.
And that's spelled out in H. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, moving on to program reductions. The first one is enforcing class size maximums in the secondary district with respect to the SBTA contract. Based on a snapshot of enrollment in September, we looked at how we were currently staffed versus if we drove class sizes up to the maximums currently contained in the contract. Obviously, this is driving things to the ultimate max. I had a conversation with Board Member Deacon today about whether this is a continuum, and it is a continuum to some extent because this would be the needle all the way over. And we're also looking at the operational logistic challenges of doing this, and we know that we would need some help through negotiations to do this. But we don't have that worked out yet, and hopefully we'll continue to work collaboratively with SPTA. But we could do this in a perfect world if we could move everything to the maximums. You can see the differences in FTEs that would have to be allocated to the sites versus what we actually allocated this year. You can see that using staffing ratios of 35-1 at Dos Pueblos and Santa Barbara High and 33-1 at San Marcos, and going to 33-1 at all the junior highs, you can see that we're overstaffed based on this calculation by 54 FTEs. Now, that doesn't contemplate the provision of a prep, but even if you looked at teachers teaching 5 out of 6 and basically arrived at a factor and applied it towards that 45, that would reduce it to, or 54, that would reduce it down to 45 rather. So taking 45 FTEs roughly, and actually it's 45.53 times a replacement cost of $73,100, you can see the figure's $3.3 million. Now let me tell you what that does not include. Outside of that is, this is strictly an unrestricted staffing ratio. Basically the partnership academies, the ones that are funded by the state, they're not in there because they have their own staffing ratios. The additional electives that the board grants to the junior highs, they're not in there. 9th grade class size reduction, which basically has program requirements, that's not in there. But everything else that's unrestricted is in there and forms the basis of that calculation. Parcel taxes and categoricals are also excluded from this. It's strictly unrestricted. So this is how the calculation lays out. It is showing the maximum on the continuum. If we drove everything up to those, you know, staffing ratios, which are permissible under the current SPTA contract. So it's not a negotiable item. It's basically a logistical item in terms of how do you build a master schedule unless we have some flexibility, which becomes a negotiable item, which I can't really talk more about. So in any event, but I hope to be talking to you more about later. So as you can see, that's really a cornerstone of the proposal because of order of magnitude, and we hope that we'll be able to share some good news with you on the 23rd about this. Item J, reduce psychologists in accordance with the fiscal crisis management assistance recommendations. 2 years ago, the board approved reducing the number of psychologists in the districts by 5 full-time equivalents. That actually did not occur. Subsequent to that, the fiscal crisis and management assistance team, as part of their special ed review, came back and said that we're ostensibly overstaffed with psychologists based on looking at comparative districts and looking at where our ratios are. You can see the state ratio, and then you can see actually the current district ratio. Based on seniority, that's how we're actually looking at the cost savings here. That could be subject to change depending on if the board adopted this recommendation and actually, how it actually filtered out through bumping. But that's where the cost savings comes from. K, eliminate homeschool Santa Barbara grades K-6. As you know, the secondary portion of homeschool Santa Barbara has really been folded under alternative ed, but we still have a $200,000 expense, K-6 homeschool Santa Barbara, which was really created when we were a revenue limit district as a mechanism to increase attendance and attendance apportionment. As we go into basic aid status, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to operate a program that does not help us on the revenue side and just has an additional expense that we didn't incur up until 2 years ago. As you can see, Homeschool Santa Barbara has a budget of $200,000 for the K-6, so that would be actually the cost savings attributed to the elementary district. Item L, eliminate unrestricted expense on summer school in the elementary district. We calced, looking at the expense that was attributed to non-categorical programs for operating summer school last year, it was $85,000. If we eliminated the unrestricted summer school expense in the elementary district, it would be $85,000 savings. Item M, reduce alternative ed certificated staffing. Given what's proposed in I worked with Kathy Abney to basically look at what could be done in alternative ed. Since alternative ed staffing ratios are not prescribed in the contract, there was an equity issue here. She put this together, and her proposal would to move the requested Dos Pueblos County District, the CDS code, which we've talked about, over to Dos Pueblos High School, the same that's been done at Santa Barbara High School and San Marcos High School, creating a bridge program at DP. Eliminate one teaching position or one full-time equivalent and reduce the second teaching position by transferring that to Alta Vista. So you can see the combined savings in the secondary district would be $98,482.
Eric, before you continue, let me just alert the board that I put another agenda item on following this one because of the programmatic implications to K on eliminating homeschool Santa Barbara grades K-6 and M, reducing alternative education certificated staffing. I thought it was only fair to the public that we notify them that we're having discussions about those programs. And I suspected that the board might say, well, these are true, these are budget cuts, but they also do affect the program, and we'd like to have more discussion about those programs. So we can have further discussion at that point, although you can go ahead and discuss these as well now. Well, in just a minute when we finish.
So item N is eliminate youth service specialists at secondary sites and reallocate pupil retention block grant funding. As the board knows, pupil retention block grant funding is a tier 3 categorical, which makes it essentially unrestricted at this point. Right now, we have 7 youth service specialists that are funded through a combination of tobacco use prevention education, pupil retention block grant, and federal safe and drug-free monies. Obviously, those federal dollars cannot be reallocated and really do not give us, any relief. So the total cost is about $175,000 for these 7 YSS counselors, but the amount that we can actually reallocate is only from the pupil retention block grant. That would be a savings of $122,308. Item O, administrative reductions. The first is to replace principal at Santa Barbara Community Academy with a head teacher. We've seen that site continue to shrink. We think that we can move to a head teacher instead of a principal at that site. It's not a total 100% cost savings because there's a differential there. You're still placing a body, but it would be a savings of $43,000 to the unrestricted general fund. Item P is reorganize child development program and eliminate 1 coordinator. Although this is not a cost savings to the unrestricted general fund, it would result in a savings of $114,011. I want to talk a little bit more about administrative reductions after I'm done with this section because I just received some information off the wire that I shared with Dr. Sarvis. I guess that's a good segue. we don't think this is going to be the end of it. It looks like the governor's proposal to basically look at targeted administrative reductions by function, which is a section of the account code structure, is gaining steam, and we just saw the methodology. And basically, they're going to identify a list of functions that we may have to cut, and what they want us to do is to cut 12% out of the 8-9 fiscal year level. So whatever we do here would count against this or count against that, but it's not going to be nearly enough. It's interesting because it's our understanding that if this does pick up traction, the 12% will be across all funds and resources. So traditionally, where we're cutting just on the unrestricted general fund because we have to maintain an adequate reserve, this is more of a, I'm trying to look for an appropriate euphemism. I can't find one. It escapes me right now. But
I can think of an expletive.
yeah, it's just kind of a across the board blitzkrieg of a budget cut, and if that comes to realization, this could be just the first tier of administrative cuts we see. Reduce administrative assignments at junior high schools. We've been looking at our staffing ratios here. Basically, by moving them to closer to 500 to 1, we're at around 300 to 1. We could eliminate 2 APs at the junior high level. As you can see, that's $219,538 savings to the secondary district. We started down this path last year with the partial elimination of the equipment safety welfare, or safety welfare and administrative position at the district office. This would basically propose the entire elimination of that, the remainder of that position, for a savings of $82,176 in the secondary district. Support staff reductions, and there is a little bit of a misnomer here because you remember that if there's a reduction in the routine restricted maintenance account from 3 to 2, it's likely there will be support staff laid off as a result of that. But since we don't know how that will manifest itself exactly, I couldn't illustrate that in this portion of the narrative. Eliminate community service portion of the 3 career center technicians, which is basically something that we discussed last year. Those are half-time positions that are funded out of the unrestricted general fund, and then they're generally augmented with categoricals at the sites. If we did that, that would be $86,500 savings in the secondary. And then reduce alternative ed classified staffing. This kind of goes hand in hand with Kathy Abney's proposal with the certificated staffing reduction. You can see she gives you a little continuum here, depending on enrollment, eliminate 1 or both of the aid positions. And so if you eliminate 1, it's $20,064. If we eliminated both, it'd be $49,950. Of course, I took the higher number and put it in the narrative. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, or if you need additional information, I'll be happy to provide that as well.
Do we want to go to public comment at this point? Let's go to public comment. Okay, 2 minutes each.
Yes. Okay, so public comment on this item is now closed, and we will take 2 minutes each. I apologize, the buffer fell off of my mic. Rory Diaz, followed by Helen Hernandez. Christina. Okay, Christina Aguirre-Kolb. Followed by Rory Diaz.
Hi. I'd like to talk with you about Part J of the fiscal plan. First of all, one quick change. We're not 18, we're 17. Not all of us work full-time. Additionally, we have one psychologist going on retirement, which would bring us down to one more psychologist, and then we would be up to 16. The other thing I'd like to note about Part J is that, yes, the Fiscal Crisis Management Team did make that recommendation, but as a member of the FCMAT stakeholders team, where I was joined by community members, other district personnel, we all unanimously declared that this was one of the FCMAT recommendations that should be removed, because they too saw the value of what we do as school psychologists. So essentially, I'm somewhat offended that while we put in so much work into meeting so many Monday evenings and going over what was discussed, what was considered as important for these FCMAT recommendations, this own board asked that the stakeholders be brought together, and then you're not even listening to what the FCMAT recommended, which is that this be put on the very far back burner and not remove 5 psychologists from the school district. I have already come up here several times in the past advocating that you keep the school psychologists, and you also honored me for the hard work that I do and going beyond my own position and working with our special needs kids. You take away 5, I'm not going to be able to do that additional work. As well, you're going to increase litigious cases, which you constantly have to talk in closed session. My colleagues are going to talk further about what we actually do as school psychologists, where if you remove 5 of us, it's going to significantly injure the school district. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Ms. Diaz, followed by Helen Hernandez.
Good evening. My name is Rory Diaz. I'm a school psychologist. I'm going to read you a partial list of roles and responsibilities of school psychologists within the Santa Barbara school districts. Initial special education assessments, which are required by law. Triennial special education assessments, which are also required by law. Amended special education assessments, required by law. 30-day placement assessments, which are SELPA policy. Manifestation determination assessments, as required by law. Private school assessments, also required by law. Review files to create assessment plans, also required by law. Initial IEP meetings, triennial IEP meetings, requested review IEP meetings, 30-day placement IEP meetings, all required by law. Manifestation determination IEP meetings, DIS counseling when crisis initiated, walk-in counseling, those are not specifically special education students, all required by law. Member of an incident response team, safety team alerts and consultation, school all staff development meetings. We also write social emotional goals as required by law, completing progress reports for social emotional goals on IEPs, which are required by law, mental health, AB 3632 referrals, Tri-Counties Regional Center referrals, functional behavioral assessments,
30 seconds.
functional analysis assessments, behavior support plans, also required by law, 504 meetings with counselors, 504 meetings with parents, SST or student success team, file reviews and meetings with counselors, 504 meetings with parents, truancy mediation team review files, student observations, consultation and collaboration with general education teachers and other staff, ordering testing supplies, which we are the best trained to determine, training new staff as best practice.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz.
Thank you.
Helen Hernandez, followed by Paul Lozano.
Good evening. I'm Helen Hernandez, one of the school psychologists. Understandably, the board is stressed to adopt a new budget soon. The proposal to reduce the number of full-time psychologists, this proposal, however, is false. It's a false savings. I asked the board to consider, for example, 2007-2008 school year, approximately $188,000 was spent on the District of Independent Educational Evaluations in private special education services. This was 2 to 3 times the cost of having services done by the district-employed school psychologists and other specialists. The board has to approve some special education extra expenses, and I'm very sure you're very familiar with the excess expenses that some settlements can bring. This is an example of ensuing considerable damage to the district budget that is already slim. Will we save money for fewer staff? With fewer psychologists, reducing the number of school psychologists will increase individual workload that is already heavy and open the door to more expensive private assessments. There will also be an increase of audit compliance issues that they include due process hearings. Again, the amount that the district feels they will save is false. I ask the board to make a sound, well-informed decision when considering special education services, and more specifically, reducing the number of school psychologists. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. Paul Lozano, followed by Juan Gallardo. Paul Lozano? Oh. Mr. Gallardo?
Hi, my name is Juan Gallardo, and I am the only male bilingual school psychologist, and I am a product of the Santa Barbara School Districts. In making the proposed cuts, you would be cutting me. As you all know, the Special Education Department has been in need of consistent leadership for years. Although we appreciate the hiring of the 6 administrators for the Special Education Department, as it helps with organization and procedures that we so badly need, we should not forget that we are the ones in the trenches, and if we are gone, who will do the work? Consequently, you should know the implications this will have on our district. If this decision is made, the psychologists will be spread thinner than they already are. It will translate into assessment plans that are not mailed, assessments not completed within timelines, letters from parents that do not receive replies, behavior support plans that are not completed, functional behavior analysis that cannot take place, reports that are not written within the 60-day timelines, DIS counseling sessions that do not take place, crises that we cannot respond to, such as the current increase in suicides, teen suicides, and IEPs that are not held. You may not understand all of our terminology, but what you will understand is that these requirements are mandated by state and federal law, which will be broken and found out of compliance. As a result of the lack of staffing, the district will be forced to outsource services to costly private practitioners, and it will lead to litigation and expensive settling of cases.
30
Knowing
seconds.
this, is the district really going to save money by cutting 5 school psychologists? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gallardo. Deborah Keys Thomas, followed by Michael Thrasher.
Hi, I'm Debbie Keys Thomas. I've been a teacher in the school district in the special education department for the last 18 years. I've worked with school psychologists daily, and I rely on them for their knowledge. I'm currently a program specialist for the district office and a member of the FCMAC's stakeholders group. I've also been tasked to be the co-chair of the communication subgroup for the FCMAT program. So I'm going to communicate at this point in time that at our many stakeholders meetings, we prioritized the recommendations that came from the FCMAT report, and the cutting and reduction of school psychologists was not a priority for our group. I would hope that we would follow what we've been doing for the last several months to try to straighten out our department and respect the work that's been done at the stakeholders meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Key Thomas. Michael Thrasher, followed by Cynthia Pereira.
Good evening, Board. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Santa Barbara Teachers Association. I was going to talk to you in general about the reality of what budget cuts meant to the students within the district, but now since we've had the plan, I guess I can refer directly to that. We all understand that the cuts that loom before you make for a very difficult task. There are going to be many heart-wrenching decisions, and for that reason, I do not envy you or the position that you find yourself in when looking over any proposed cuts. We would request that you take some serious time to look very close at what each of the cuts actually does to the main stakeholders in all of this, the students. The statements by the district, educators, parents, and community have always been to keep the cuts as far away from the classroom and the students as possible. We're not sure that any cut list made can do that. We'd request that you ask questions from those who are directly affected by these cuts. Let the stakeholders be part of this process, whoever it may be, counselors, psychologists, teachers, or other school site personnel. Let them know if you would like more information about how cuts or changes are going to affect the students and the classroom settings. Some of the cuts that are proposed will have significant detrimental impact on our students, which is the last place that we can afford to lose quality. We realize that increasing class sizes and downsizing or eliminating programs offer low-hanging fruit solutions to budget problems. They also represent, in many cases, the most directly and deceptively negative impact on our students, and as such are very serious concerns for the parents, teachers, and district employees.
30
We
seconds.
urge you, therefore, to be extremely circumspect in considering cuts of this nature. As educators, we're asking you to consider any cut in its broadest and in its most narrowest of terms to see how it will affect not just the budget of the district, but also the individual school sites, the parents, and the educators who work so hard to keep the schools going, and perhaps most importantly, how each one of the budget cuts will affect the educational progress of all students in this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thrasher. Cynthia Pereira, followed by David Holmes.
Good evening. My name is Cynthia Pereira, and I'm a school psychologist. And I'm here to talk about some of the roles that school psychologists do. When the FICMAT team came to our school district, it was asked by the administrators to provide information about the current school psychologist to student ratio, but only that. They were not asked to investigate and compare what other school psychologists do in the state and the school psychologists in the Santa Barbara school districts. You may wonder what the big deal is, but we do incredibly more at this district. We are not just psychometricians who only assess for special education eligibility and write reports. School psychologists provide the following services in the areas of consultation, evaluation, intervention, prevention, and research for our students and the district. These are a few of the duties outlined by the National Association of School Psychologists, NASP. Consultation. We collaborate with teachers, parents, and administrators to find effective solutions to learning and behavior problems. We help others understand child development and how it affects learning and behavior. We strengthen working relationships between teachers, parents, and service providers in the community. We consult on Section 504 students. We provide knowledge to help educators and staff and students. We implement and manage academic interventions. We meet, communicate, and coordinate with mental health professionals for
30
students.
seconds.
We collaborate with teachers to assist in resolving detrimental classroom behaviors, including gang-related behaviors and the increasing rise in suicide in the Santa Barbara school districts and more. Thank you very much, and I actually have a printout of what some of us have read tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Pereira. David Holmes.
Hi, David Holmes, Santa Barbara Teachers Association. Whenever we face cuts like this, the message is always consistent from the Teachers Association, and you've heard it a number of times already tonight that we ask you to keep the cuts as far away from the classroom as possible. You can't keep going back to the well over and over again without it running dry. You have very, very talented professionals in the classroom who care deeply about the students they're teaching. And miraculously, year after year, cuts after cuts after cuts, these professionals do more with less. But at some point, you're going to have diminishing returns, and you're going to get less. And I hope you rue the day that happens. I would like to see you direct the staff to look deeper into administrative cuts. Look at the overhead you have here. Make the cuts as far away from the classroom as possible. You cannot keep asking teachers to do more with less. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. That concludes public comment.
Okay, thank you all for your comments. I'd like to just start with all of us want your input, and anybody else who has it. So all of your comments and thoughts, you have our email addresses, let us know. Comments from the board? Mrs. Cordero? Any? No?
Sorry. Well, I had a couple of.
How do we want to do this? Let's start there. Do you want to go A, B, C, D, and go look at each one, or do you want to pick the ones that are most interesting to each of you?
I'd rather pick. But.
I think it'll be more, a bit quicker if we just each have our own time and pick up the ones, and maybe we can chime in on the ones that we have further questions on.
May I ask, over this 2-week period tonight and over the next couple of weeks, if board members want any more information about any of these items, now is the time to ask so that we can pencil things out, so that you can give us direction on that. We have a board brief coming out at the end of this week. I know that after making cuts last April, 3 million, June, 1.5 million, October, 3 million. Here we go. Making another round of cuts at 6 million and thinking that that may not be enough. I know that this is even more painful now that we're going through this for the 5th time. So.
Thank you. Mrs. Cordero.
I have a couple comments and a couple questions. One is, that obviously, I think all of us will probably, comment on this, that given that it is our 4th round of cuts, this year, yeah. All the things that were priorities to cut have already been cut. So now we're getting to the things that we tried to save in all those other rounds. And so it is painful because these are the things that we have identified as being the most important. That's why they haven't been cut before. And we have repeatedly tried to protect them, and now we're at the point of having to cut into things that we have all felt were worth trying to save. So it becomes even more difficult the further we go along. So that's, I think, something that we're all going to have to deal with. In some areas we were understaffed before the cutting started, and so this has just exacerbated an already existing problem. In other areas, we were able to make some adjustments initially that weren't too deeply felt, but now we've cut past any fat that might have existed, and we've cut even in some cases, even beyond the flesh and into the bone now. So I think we just sort of all need to recognize that this is, just at the point where we are. But I had a couple of questions regarding if we could see some numbers. Well, let me back up to the first question, and that is, I might have missed it. I think you probably said it. Do you know what the total is for the amount that you have identified in all of these? If we did every single one of them, how much would it total?
I believe we have a spreadsheet, do we not?
I actually totaled it.
Did
so.
you? I was going to, and I didn't.
I think it's roughly 6.6.
6.686.
6.686. Okay.
131.
Okay. So I was wondering if there were 2 particular areas where I was interested in seeing some maybe middle ground. It probably even more than these 2 areas, but these in particular. And one was in the class size maximums. If we in the past we have looked at if we increased incrementally, how much that would total. And the other one was for the reduction in psychologists. If instead of, is that the one I was looking at? Yeah, if instead of reducing it by 5, what if we did 3 or something like that?
The second is easier to do. However, the caveat is that I was talking to our credential person today about the feasibility of skips for bilingual psychologists. So I need to know whether that's a board priority, because based on seniority, it would be different amounts.
So you're saying if we were to allow bilingual psychologists to have priority
A preference.
over people with greater seniority but who are not bilingual.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
Because the calculations will be different based on bumping.
Well, unfortunately, to me, it seems like if we're going to reduce the number we have to maximize the skills that they possess. So it seems.
Or I could bring back both.
Well, people may want to do that too, because it's certainly worth having all the information we can get.
Well, okay, maybe we can do it that way. So we'd have an option A, option B, continuum there.
Mrs. Deacon.
As I pondered all this, I have to say I was getting angry, and I was getting angry at the governor and the legislature in Sacramento because, to my mind, they really abdicated leadership and left us to do the dirty work, and that's what we're facing right now. But picking up on what Mrs. Cordero said, I think we absolutely want to look at a continuum with the increasing class size at the high school, and I would just like to point out that, or at the secondary level, that we're not touching elementary at this point, which
That's
is a
correct.
good thing. So,
And I probably should have pointed out that the structural deficit exists mostly in the secondary district at this point in time. So that's why there's a disproportionate share of reductions targeted at the secondary district. We're dealing with an interesting phenomenon right now as the elementary, although it's got a meager reserve, I'm just barely making it, it doesn't actually have a structural deficit if you break it out separately. That the secondary district, which has a large reserve, has a huge operating deficit that, unless it's addressed, will burn right through it. And that's what brings us to where we are.
and just keeping in mind, though, that there are other districts in the state that have gone to 35 students at their elementary levels. So when we look at everything in context, I think it's important to remember that. Regarding the psychologist, I am on the FCMAT stakeholder group, and I just feel the need to address what my understanding was of what that group decided, which was we rank ordered priorities of things that absolutely had to be done. I don't think anybody in that group thought we had to get rid of psychologists, and so there was no unanimous vote. There were no votes or anything like that. I mean, clearly we wouldn't put that at the top of any list, but to my mind that doesn't necessarily take it off the table, at least in some portion, as we work very hard to keep the cuts away from the classroom. And I understand students are affected when we reduce psychologists, but to my mind, instruction is where I feel that I really have to put my emphasis. I did have a question about, Mr. Smith, you mentioned this possible 12% cut coming down in administration. Would that cut play into our $6 million so that if we were required to cut more at the administrative level, we could cut less of the things we're considering now?
You know, I was thinking about that myself. That the problem is that we've made a conscious decision here to proportionally share in the pain in terms of reductions. It's more likely that those administrative cuts, this is addressing our own operating deficit. The additional administrative cuts are basically a top-down imposition that we would probably have to make anyways.
So I'm sorry, so that would
Not factor in, would not give us
not.
relief out of the $6
Out of the
million.
$6 million, okay. All right, well, I would like to thank you for giving us,
What it might do is give us relief on an additional
a future
increase in the operating deficit, which I think is likely.
okay. Well, I'm trying to look for something positive
You're looking for a
here.
silver lining?
I know
Yeah.
there's no silver lining, but I would like to thank you for at least giving us some things that we can potentially take off the table. I mean, we have 600,000 possibly to play with here, and I hope we can be judicious in deciding where that can best be kept.
And depending on what the board directs us to do, there might be additional items added by the time we come back to the 23rd that, you know, will figure into this jigsaw puzzle.
Mrs. Parker?
This is my 4th year in a row of going through this process. It's incredibly depressing. And every year I think, how can we possibly do this again? And I know that for Mrs. Cordero and many of our staff members, it's been a lot longer than that. And I feel sorry for all of us, but of course it directly affects our students and our teachers. And that is, it's really hard to be up here in this situation. I would like to start by just touching on 3 things that are not on the list that I would like to have looked at. And one is looking more at cuts at the district office. Not necessarily at admin. I know that what you've looked in terms of management level, but management level and across the board, support staff as well, because I do think it's important to look here first. Even though we've looked here for the 4 years that I've been here doing this, and I know that it's really tough given the amount of responsibilities that are going on. The other 2 things, if we're considering eliminating elementary summer school, could there be any cost savings from eliminating junior high summer school? And if so, what would that be, and how could any?
Yeah, you should address that if you know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we're actually eliminating all summer school except for the 8th grade students who need classes to transfer, not to necessarily promote, but the lowest level to transfer. And those would be held on the high school campuses, so that we're eliminating any costs for clerical, all that kind of stuff. And we're also eliminating the coordinating position, so that sites at the high school would be just operating with the people who are there. And the high school students, the only ones would be those that are in jeopardy of graduating. You can tell, like, they need so many, there's no way they're going to get it within the time span that they have in school.
So then I guess my question, Mr. Smith, is could you show us that savings?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that,
Okay.
so that should be an additional cost savings that we should be able to show you.
We
Okay.
just talked about that with secondary principals.
Okay. And the third thing is Community Day School, which is currently serving fewer than 20 students. What I wonder is if it would not be more cost effective for those students to be served at their home sites, to come up with a program that keeps them supported and helps them with credit recovery at their sites, rather than running an entirely separate and a rather expensive program for the number of students that are involved.
And we have had some discussion of that. We can give you some ideas. Robin, would you like to?
We just had a brief discussions, not even with all the junior high principals. There are junior high principals that support that. Kathy Abney also feels like that could be a possibility to look into. We've not talked with Community Day staff, so it's just in the initial stages, but definitely something we need to look into.
Then I'm just going to quickly run through the few things, and I'm going to try to do that in order so that I can keep track of what I'm thinking of. I know that we're going to come to this a little bit later. I'm very concerned about moving this routine restricted maintenance. I think that this is the right one to target, but I'm really concerned about the state of our schools. For B, the eliminating of the funding for the crossing guards. The city rather blithely proposed last spring that when they cut this, that we would supply PTA volunteers to cross our students, or maybe older students. And given the liability and the risks to students and to PTAs, we just couldn't imagine anybody, any parent organization or volunteer organization taking this on. And so the district took it on. But the city, in fact, has restricted funding that they could be using to support the school crossing guards. It doesn't need to come from their general fund. It hasn't come from their general fund. And I really think that we need to take this back to the city. One question on the ASB accounting. What do other districts do on this?
I'll have to do some research on that.
Because I certainly appreciate that you're doing a lot of work, and thank you for pointing that out. But it is also one of those things where it's sort of a function of the school to take care of these students in that way, and so it's hard to address it in terms of indirect costs, and it might be better to do something like go after student parking fees. But we can talk about that more. The class size maximums, you know, it looks feasible on paper. Very concerned about it in practice in terms of if you have 60 students that want to take a class, if they want to take AP English, then are you telling 25 that they couldn't do it?
I think we'll be better equipped to give you an answer on that on the 23rd.
Okay.
It'd be premature for me to respond to that at this point in time.
And on the school psychologists, I agree with my colleagues, you know, definitely want to see a range on that. One question, I know that this wouldn't really affect savings to the general fund because the general fund makes a large contribution to the special education services for students. But how much, or if any, are school psychologists paid for with targeted special ed funding, considering how much time they spend on special ed?
The lion's share are funded out of special ed, but there's some that are not.
I'll save talking about Homeschool Santa Barbara and Dos Pueblos for those items, since that's coming up on the agenda. With item S, eliminating the community service portion of the career center techs, is that a suggestion that we eliminate community service hours as a requirement for graduation?
It's not a requirement.
How would that be kept track of?
Well, that is in fact what we heard. We heard that that we could reconsider that requirement, that's community service requirement, even though we're all very proud of that community service requirement. We also heard alternatively that maybe we shouldn't keep track of hours over 60. You know, when students apply to universities, students make their own statements about how many hours they put in. They don't go get a letter from the school saying this student was verified as having put in 400 hours for some organization. And maybe that's all we do need to track is up to the 60 hours, and that's it.
Okay. I want to just touch on one last thing, and that's the junior high assistant principals. Our junior highs, frankly, are doing better academically than our high schools. Yes. And I strongly believe that one of the reasons that is so is because they have a lower admin to student ratio than their high schools do. And I recognize, I mean, again, I would prefer to look at the district office for admin cuts rather than even admin cuts at school sites. I recognize that we're going to need to make cuts. But I do want to point out that this is, I don't see them as overstaffed. I see our high schools as severely understaffed.
We do too.
Mrs. Deacon?
Since we're throwing out additional ideas, I have a couple too, and they may or may not result in a lot of money. Last time we looked at the possibility of requiring certificate administrators to substitute 3 days a week. It wasn't a lot of money, but I actually think it's a good idea anyway. We looked at athletic trainers last time. I'm not advocating getting rid of them completely, but maybe when we reduced the hours of the health assistants in the past, it went to a part-time. I believe some of the athletic trainers also are employed through ROP, so this might not be their only source of income. We also last time considered administrative furloughs, and I think it was a $72,000 figure for 1%. So those would just be some other ideas.
I'll go through some of the items myself too, and I hopefully won't just repeat. have we talked to the city about crossing guard for next year? Has this proposal B been run by them, or is this just? I mean,
We're just starting that process.
because if they watch this program, we've given away half. You know, so I'm just curious. Okay.
Yeah, but I'd be 50% ahead.
Okay, good. This charging associated student bodies, let me try to put it in perspective. Let's just take what we heard tonight about the special program by the San Marcos. And they gave $140,000 to Christmas Unity or Unity Shop. But their expenses were probably considerably more than that even. So would this be 4.74% of all the money they raised, or all the expenses plus what they gave to Unity Shop, or is it? I mean, we'd be charging on their entitled.
We looked at their total expenditures from the fiscal year end 8-9 audit, the combined statement, and that's how we arrived at the calculation. So it is based on total expenditures.
Okay. And so in the high schools, the student bodies under this scenario would have to raise another $50,000, $60,000,
Or do with less.
dilute their programs by $50,000 or $60,000. That just seems to be a big hit to me for something we're so proud of at the schools that the students are so actively involved in. So that one, H, sort of bothers me. On the class size maximum, I mean, do we have special classes like French or that don't have 35 students in them? I mean, what would happen in classes that might have 20 people who want to take it? Are they just going to be gone?
Well, that's an issue because if you look through our master schedules, we have tons of classes with 13, 14, 15. So there is a floor issue there. And that's tremendously inefficient, even though programmatically it might be great.
Do we have any estimate on how many classes would be eliminated if this plan was implemented?
No, because, I mean, it's going to change from year to year. It's dynamic.
Okay. On psychologists, on the topic of FCMAT, just in general, I wasn't on the task forces, and I went to a couple meetings. But I've made my position really clear, is my expectation is the FCMAT report recommendations will be done, with one caveat, unless it's proven to this board that the FCMAT recommendations shouldn't be done. And I personally haven't seen any discussion yet on why things weren't a priority. I mean, I can see it easy when you want to cut 5 people. I can see why that's not a priority. But I don't know what discussion took place avoiding the FCMAT recommendation. So, but I saw easily it was a priority to hire 5 nurses. But those are the kinds of things that I've made clear to Dr. Miller during the process, that I really want factual information of why the study groups made their decisions in a lot of cases. And it's this body that makes the decision. It's not the FCMAT report. It's not the special stakeholders groups. Obviously, we are very, very proud of all the work that went in. But it's our decision that has to be done. We have to make the final decision. So, you know, FCMAT said their recommendation was reduce 5. And that may be true, it may be not, as being good. But I would expect real strong documentation, arguments, discussion as to why we shouldn't follow FCMAT. I'm going to have to be convinced not to follow FCMAT, just as a general course across the board on all of the topics. And this board has not approved carte blanche the FCMAT report or the stakeholders group or the action plan. We've accepted it, but there's a lot of little points in that have to each individually have to be brought to us for approval. So I'm going to look really hard on that one, but I expect, I would love to see factual arguments on why FCMAT should not be followed through with. I vaguely remember reading some documents when I ran for this office. I wonder why. About a grand jury report where the grand jury talked to us about these youth service specialists. But I forget what our response was to that. But I would like to review that to make sure we didn't make any obligations in that grand jury response that we need to follow through with. So I just don't know. I just remember that vaguely. Number R. The elimination of the .6 full-time equivalent safety welfare. I've seen the person who that is aimed at on a regular basis when we're talking about expulsion cases and stipulated agreements and the new student support plan. I've seen that person in operation. I see the dedication that person has to the job. And I don't, I'm not talking about the person individually, but I've seen what he does. And I have real serious doubts that that job could be done by moving it up to the director level. I don't know how a director could do all those expulsion cases, try to run a brand new, keeping children, students in school. I really question the wisdom of moving those things up a notch. I would maybe like to look at all the upper notches and see if there are people in the organization that might be able to do some of those things. So I question R very much. I would like more information on exactly how the Director of Student Services will take on those responsibilities. I mean, it's nice to say, okay, do them, but there's a tremendous amount of cases that they look at, and so I'd like to know how the director can do that. I think that are my comments. Any further, Mrs. Goodell?
I think the first time we did this, well, I don't know, I shouldn't say the first time. The first time would go way back. But we see, it seems to be cyclical. We go through really dire budget times, although I haven't seen, in my memory, times that were like this, that were as bad as this. But I've certainly seen bad budget times. And we make dramatic cuts. And then, I was on a committee that recommended some of the dramatic cuts that were made at the district level, that while I still think they were probably the right things to do at the time, they had some pretty significant consequences that were not beneficial to the district in many ways, because we ended up with a lack of oversight, with not enough staff to make sure that jobs got done, with things falling through the cracks. There was a lot of problems that resulted from some of those cuts. I think the alternatives might have been even worse. So maybe they were still the right decisions to have made, but we have to remember that whatever we do, it's going to have a consequence, and they're not always going to be pleasant. But in recent years, when we did this, I think the first time maybe about 3 years ago or maybe 4 years ago, when we came to the meeting, and it was really easy to say, oh, we can't cut this. Oh, we can't cut that. These are so important. And we ended up so far away from our target that we weren't even close to reaching a balanced budget. And so I think it would be incredibly easy to make an argument for why we need every single thing on this list. As I said, these are all the things that we have tried to protect for the first 3 or 4 go-rounds. But the fact remains that no matter how important every single thing is, we have to cut $6 million. So if we don't want to cut this, what are we going to cut instead? We don't get the money from this item that's on the list. Where are we going to get the money? Because we have to cut. We have to reach that $6 million figure somehow. So I would just encourage all of us on the board, as we're looking at things we want to protect, then we have to come up with an alternative that will get us to that $6 million bottom line. Because no matter how much we hate it, we have to get there. So I agree with everybody who said this is a horrible position to be in, but we're in it. So we've got to meet our responsibilities and get it done.
Other comments? Staff?
I just have a clarifying comment. I think Board Member Parker made a comment about the routine restricted maintenance account. So I'm inferring that you might want to see at least a figure, if it didn't go from 3 to 2, maybe put that on a continuum too, like 2.5. So at least you would have that figure in the event there was additional
if there's a
savings
miracle.
elsewhere.
Sure, but I have to say that will be the first place that I go, because the most important thing is the teacher, who could be teaching in a cardboard box in the middle of the road, and but it's just a shame to see what the state that our facilities have gotten to.
I'm reading into that there would be enough additional savings either that are currently above the $6.6 million or with these additional items that would backfill that difference from going from 3 to 2 to 3 to 2.5.
You could ask. Mr. Heron, may I ask one more question that I forgot to ask on the school psychologist topic on bilingual school psychologists? Is that something that would need to be negotiated if we could have a priority for bilingualism, or is?
I'd have to, I think it's more of a legal requirement, and I think we've plowed that ground already, but I'll check into whether it's negotiable as well.
Okay.
I don't think it is.
Okay.
I do have a comment, though. Board members may have some additional thoughts after tonight, and while you can't talk with each other, well, you can talk with one other board member about that. Could you please share those with Eric Smith and CC me on those? Or you may have other questions about other information you'd like to receive over the next couple of weeks.
On the maintenance issue, I mean, I'd like to know what is not going to be done by cutting $1.2 million. I mean, what types of things will just be off the board and not done? What will happen to the schools? It
Dave,
says
you
it
wanna
might
address
be
it?
it might be a staff reduction, but
Well, a staff reduction is the major part of this. And Dave Hetyoung should really address some of that, because he's thought through what might happen in his department.
Dr. Sarvis, members of the board, in thinking ahead what could happen if the board went the full 3% to 2%, that's 1/3 of our maintenance budget. So you could logically, without analyzing the budget, say, well, that's going to be 1/3 of what you do. There's certain things that we do that we're obligated to do no matter what. That's like maintain our elevators, maintain our lifts, maintain our fire alarm system, some of those things. Some of those things are done by in-house personnel, some are done by personnel that are contract services. So it definitely involves reduction of positions. We currently have 1 plumber boiler, 2 HVAC techs, 2 carpenters, 2 electricians, 2 plumbers. So if we had to cut positions, when work orders come in, there's going to be a prioritization of what's most important, what's affecting safety, and things that aren't affecting safety are going to be further down the list. And unfortunately, what our maintenance department maintains primarily is our classrooms. So there's going to be maybe light fixtures in the classrooms that need a ballast that won't be done right away. There may be electrical outlets that aren't working that won't be fixed right away. There may be peeling lead paint that may not be addressed as soon as it should have. There may be toilets that aren't working that don't get fixed for a longer period of time than what it takes now.
like how much longer?
Well, I can say that we hear complaints now that we had in our plumbing department, we had 2 plumbers. One was out for an extended period of time on disability. We were down to 1 plumber, and so you get the complaints from the schools. Why aren't you out here today? Fixing my toilet. The custodian tries to unstop it first. They have plungers and snakes, but if they can't, then you call the plumber out there. And if the plumber can't get there right away, it's just not responded to. You shut off the water until the person can get there, and that's one less fixture you have to use.
Yeah, that bothers me dramatically. Mrs. Parker?
I have to say, Mr. Hetjong, that before I came on this board, one of the main reasons that I came to school board meetings was because I was so horrified by the state of my child's school. And I remember speaking to you at the time and saying, how could it be that the district is not spending money on the kind of money that needs to be spent on facilities? And you looked at me at the time and said, Mrs. Parker, they're always going to go for facilities first when it's time to make cuts. And here I am doing the same thing, and I want to say I'm sorry.
Well, it's the other way around, too. When there's extra money and you say, what do you want to add first? No one says, I want to add a plumber. They say, I want to add a teacher. I want to add a counselor, things like that. But unfortunately, the result of a cut would affect the classroom. We just affect it in a different way.
Okay, no campaigning now.
Plumbing is pretty close to the student. Yeah. Any other comments? If it's okay, the next item is scheduled for 40 minutes. I'm going to take a 10-minute break right now. Okay. We'll come back. Cool.
Here we go. Well, as I said earlier, some of these cuts are really more programmatic in nature, and I wanted to give sufficient time to discuss those programs and discuss how this might affect those programs. So I had gone through the list and I'd pulled out just these 2. There may be other things the board would like to talk about in the future, but I think that we'll talk about them jointly as part of cuts. If we could start with Homeschool Santa Barbara, I know we have a number of people here who are interested in that issue of Homeschool Santa Barbara, and I'll ask Robin Sawaski, our Associate Superintendent, to provide the board with some information, and I believe there are some comments on this as well, and then go to the other issue at La Cuesta dos Pueblos.
Okay, unfortunately, I don't have any grand solution for this at this point. However, we've been working, the parents and the teachers, and I've been working in a couple of different ways. One in particular is talking to the principal, Bev Abrams, or I think she's maybe head teacher, at Santa Barbara Charter School that has their home-based program. And it has had a waiting list. I mean, it has a lot of students in it. However, they are very open to looking at possibilities of maybe working with a small group of families. I mean, we're just kind of in the beginning talking stages. She hadn't consulted with her home-based staff when she and I talked a couple of times. So we're kind of in the middle of looking at if there's any way to keep a skeleton kind of or some kind of program going. So there's that. We also don't know exactly what the costs might be. And again, it wouldn't be a cost, so the whole amount that we have in here wouldn't be realized if we kept a very, very skeleton type program available through our district. So there's a couple things we've been talking about. But I don't have numbers for you right now as far as costs.
Do you have anybody else on staff who wants to make part of the report, or should we go right to public comments?
The public comments would be good.
Okay, public comments.
Okay, we only have 2 requests to speak on this item, and requests are now closed. Sonia Connors, followed by Colleen Russell.
And we are going to go for 2 minutes each, since we're an hour and 45 minutes behind schedule.
Hi there. I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to homeschool my child with the Santa Barbara School District. There was such a huge effort by Pat Morales and so many others to have this vision and carry it through. And now Jill Dixon and Colleen Russell are continuing this vision and providing an amazing set of elective courses for our kids to be enriched as part of our group. And we have kids of varying ages, kindergarten through 6, who have played and learned together in this wonderful environment. It's become such an important part of so many families. I could go on for an hour to tell you what a special program this is. Today I'm here on behalf of 17 of our families, which cover 24 of the children attending the program. And I'm not naive to the fact of what you all are facing. I know Homeschool Santa Barbara used to make sense financially prior to switching to basic aid. I see how other programs are being cut, and it makes so much sense financially to eliminate our program, and I really understand your perspective. So I appreciate this forum to express how important this program was to so many of our families. You have a wonderful public school that you offer to Santa Barbara children, and this is one way children can learn, but not every child can fit into this model. And Homeschool Santa Barbara provided not only a different way for children to learn, but also a way for our children to still be a part of a group and within the district. So I'm not here today to ask you to keep the homeschool program as it is, although I'd love to, because I love Jill and Colleen and everything this program's meant to us. But after so much effort was put into this program and creating it, and it's been such an important part of our families, I'm wondering if there could be any kind of version of Homeschool Santa Barbara that could be kept alive, even just as a placeholder, because someday there will be state and federal funding, and it would be great to bring this program back to life again. Possibly, you know, some kind of umbrella for our work records, possibly a location. We're an industrious group. Our parents would be willing to volunteer if there's something we can do to keep a placeholder for our program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Connors. Colleen Russell?
Hi, I'm one of the teachers at Homeschool Santa Barbara, and I wanted to thank the board for allowing us to try this program. It's innovative, it's exciting, it's a hybrid, and I do agree with Sonia. I'm hoping that we could actually have it come back full force in the future. I wanted to let you know that we've been very successful. Our numbers aren't high, but we've really enjoyed the opportunity. I've enjoyed working with my parents, which are our teachers, and I've enjoyed their children, and it's been wonderful as a teacher to be able to try so many new things. Here, let me check my notes. Okay. I know fiscally we heard everything, so we totally understand what you're about, and I understand how difficult that might be. But I also would like to say that we as a group, Homeschool Santa Barbara, respects the decision that you guys end up having to make, and hopefully you'll be able to save a little bit for us so we can continue in a small way next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know we appreciate your comments as well. Thank you.
Do you have comments on the La Cuesta, Dos Pueblos? Are there any comments on that from the public? No. Let's just give us an update on that, too, before the board.
Well, before Robin talks about this, I'd like to hand this out to you. This shows that, frankly, our numbers are down at La Cuesta. They've been down for a while. I have other copies for the public if you're interested. Dave, would you put those over on the side table, please? Thank you. Oh, tell you what, I'll hang on to one. In this case, if in anticipating a change for next year, well, I'll have you take a look at the second paragraph. The second paragraph says that during this school year to date, 7 students have transferred from the La Cuesta Dos Pueblos campus to the downtown campus. Of those 7 students, 5 are still attending daily. The other 2 returned to their home high school, and in this case it was San Marcos. As of February 6th, there were 16 students enrolled at the La Cuesta Dos Pueblos campus, and there were 36 others listed as inactive, but before you assume they've just disappeared, you'll find them down below. So if you'll go to the of 16 active students, the plan would be that at least 6 would transfer to the downtown campus if the La Cuesta Dos Pueblos campus were to close, and another 5 or 6 would transfer to Alta Vista. Some of those would also add ROP courses to their independent study schedule, and we think Dos Pueblos can accommodate the others in their own bridge program, which would get continuation school funding. So, Robin, what else do you want to say, or do you want Kathy
wondering
Abney to address this?
what's left. I think on the back side you can actually see the decline in enrollment starting with the 2006-2007 school year, the expected and what the actual was. Coming up to month 5 this year, again expected 40, and the actual enrollment at 19. So it's really diminished, and everything that Dr. Sarvis just stated is, that the students seem to be choosing to either go to the Alta Vista Independent or come down to the downtown, or in some cases the San Marcos, and return back to their high schools. Kathy Abney, I don't know if Principal, if you'd like to add anything more or be open for questions, certainly from the board. Kathy prepared all of this, so I guess we're open for questions.
Okay.
Well, one thing I do want to say is that we've reestablished independent study out on the Dos Pueblos campus this year. We haven't had independent study out there for a couple of years. And it's been amazing to me the number of students who have opted to go back into independent study. We actually have 19 students out there 4 days a week. So that's definitely a draw on the Dos Pueblos campus. And for the last several years, we've had a difficult time keeping that campus enrolled. And I think it's mostly the philosophy of the Dos Pueblos campus, who really wants to keep their own kids. They work very, very hard to continue to embrace their own students, and they don't want to lose their own kids. I mean, that's pretty basically their philosophy. And so to send kids away, even if it's just to a different placement on campus, is not something that they comfortably do. And so, by the time they finally decide to send a student to La Cuesta, it's, there's just fewer and fewer of them, and that's, it's been declining over the years. And so we're hoping that, if you accept this recommendation, that we're hoping to have independent study out there, Alta Vista, 5 days a week, and possibly another part-time teacher a couple of days a week. It seems to be a real draw for the older students, several students who didn't get into middle college, but still want the independent option, are still taking classes at City College. Several of the kids out there are very involved in ROP classes, but just they're more vocationally oriented, and they don't want to be in class every single day, although they'll go to the ROP classes every day. And so that seems to be a really good mix on that campus, and it hasn't, and that, of course, we don't have those options down here. So that's one of the reasons I made that recommendation, because I've got 2 teachers out there, and right now 16 students enrolled in the continuation campus, and 19 kids out there at Alta Vista, which is independent study.
Just to be very clear, though, we would still maintain the Alta Vista independent study program on the Dos Pueblos campus, so that students could attend that program, could attend ROP
Right.
courses.
Questions? Mrs. Parker?
Well, I think my question may be for Mrs. Waski. Dos Pueblos already has a bridge program that they've implemented without a CDS code, and the district has been supporting that on an equal basis, even though that program is not bringing in the pupil retention block money that the other 2 bridge programs are. And I think Dos Pueblos has been quite happy with that. And so I guess my question is, if you bring that CDS code over to Dos Pueblos, I assume then you're going to have to require that those students enroll in this second school. And how does Dos Pueblos feel about that? What does the bridge staff at Dos Pueblos think of that idea?
We haven't even had that discussion, really. This has just been, recently put forward here, and we haven't met with Mark Swanitz nor the staff there. What we would do, of course, is run it just like the other schools do, and they do have to take a different attendance, and there's some things that have to be a part of having a separate school. As you all know, you heard about it. We are going to finally have that bridge program report soon. I think it's in March. And we do give them exactly the same amount of money, $50,000, to run that program, which at this point pays for a couple of sections for teachers to have their prep time at the same time, so that they can serve the students. So to answer your question exactly, we haven't had the conversation.
Because I could see that while functionally it actually probably wouldn't be that different, psychologically it would be, and I would like to know how what their thinking is on that.
I mean, it's kind of like it would have to be just as the other schools are at this point. It's the same group of kinds of students who need special services.
And Mr. Heron?
Yes.
Do you want me to talk about Homeschool Santa Barbara at this point also?
They're both on the same agenda.
Okay. I've been really disappointed to see this on the list because I still remember that first elementary parent advisory committee meeting where Sharon brought this up with Robin, and it was so exciting. And then to see what Pat Morales did with it, it's just, I think it's a little gem. I really do. And I was sorry already with the reduction in it for this year. And so to see this proposed, I'm really disappointed because although it's new, it's one of our schools already. It's a school, and you know I know it's only a few students compared to the size of the other students, other school student bodies, but I feel like we need to respect that. And so I'm very interested in if there's any way of reducing it rather than completely eliminating the program. I know that at the time you were actually considering, or some of the parents were actually considering connecting with Ventura Unified and their homeschool program, and I don't know if that's still an option, but obviously so much better to have it right here in this community. So thank you to the teachers. I know that it's been well loved in the short time that it's been in existence, and so I would like to see if there's a spectrum on that one as well.
Okay, and I there's also a couple of other ideas that I've sort of thought of in the last couple days that I didn't want to say publicly, so we'll have more to come back to with that one.
Other comments?
I also would love to see some piece of this remain, and I have to admit I'm so impressed with the speakers tonight and how, I mean, I don't want to say resigned you are, because, I mean, you're still upbeat in some ways, even though you're feeling this going away, and I guess that's the spirit of independence that you've been demonstrating to your students all along. But when I was first running for the board, I visited the new campus in the Hope School District, one of the schools there, and it's just like, now you see it, now you don't, and it's really sad to see it go. So I appreciate the spirit in which you invested in this, and hopefully we can keep a piece of it alive. And I would just like to say about La Cuesta dos Pueblos that I think this plan makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate the effort of Dos Pueblos to integrate and keep as many students as they can in their regular classes, and I think it doesn't sound like there'd be really that many students that would be bridge in this new cohort of the bridge group moving into the other group. So hopefully they could be folded in, and I hope Dos Pueblos is open to it, because I do think it's a good idea.
Well, I'll chime in. I'm pretty much going to probably just echo what my colleagues have already said. I also agree. One of the things I appreciate about the comments tonight is how understanding they were, and having, you all sat through and heard some of the other comments that, we heard. So I appreciate the fact that you were aware of what the situation is and that you were understanding of that. And I think the request that you were making of us is relatively modest in terms of just trying to maintain some kind of a program until we are back in a position where we can get it back up and thriving. And so I'm hopeful that that is something that we would be able to accomplish, even in our tight fiscal, conditions. I really do appreciate that. The other item about DP, one thing is I want to echo what Ms. Parker said, that I think it is important, even though on paper it seems like a relatively minor change. I think it is important to hear from their staff how they feel about it and whether it would feel like a minor change to them. And then also, depending on what we decide to do with that, I'm wondering if there might be a situation in which we could accommodate kind of the same type of thing that the Homeschool Santa Barbara is requesting, almost like just a placeholder, so that we don't eliminate it completely in the event that we might actually want to resuscitate it.
You mean the CDS code?
Right.
That's, oh, yeah, we would not get
Okay.
rid of it. We
Yeah,
can't.
okay.
It would cost a lot of money to the district, much more than we're saving with this, probably.
And I also want to echo what I guess was Ms. Deacon said. To hear that DP is actually committed to trying to keep their students as part of their school and not easily let them, or sort of, I don't want to mean let them or allow them, but doesn't easily want to part with him to another school. It's so encouraging to me. I just think that's such a wonderful attitude to have. That they even though the students are challenging and having some difficulty, that the school feels a sense of commitment to them and a sense of that these are our kids. That is what our schools should be doing. And so, if that is resulting in lower numbers for La Cuesta DP, that's a great problem to have, because I wish we had that problem at every school. And so I'm happy. I mean, that's really in this night when we're hearing all this dire news. That's great. That's a great uplifting piece of information. So I appreciate that.
From our end, a little frustrating, but from their end, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
If we do this proposal and move the number to the bridge program at Dos Pueblos, do we save the 50,000 we currently are giving them because they're going to get money from?
Yes. Well.
It's all.
Well, but here's the trade-off. We currently provide $50,000 for the bridge program. We didn't put the bridge program on the list at $50,000 because we brought this proposal forward instead. So this saves that program. It doesn't provide us any more money, but we would hang on to the CDS code so that we would get that funding from the state.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, okay.
See, and this is how Robin's going to sell this to Mark.
But I guess my point is, he doesn't get two $50,000.
No.
So make sure he understands that.
No, the first one was a gift.
Okay. Other comments? Okay. Hearing none, we will go to E3, update on status of special education, including financial report of special education, ARRA funds.
Good. Tom Guajardo, our Executive Director of Special Education, will present this.
No, I don't think so.
Members of the board,
Not at
Dr.
the moment.
Sarvis, good evening. We want to do two things tonight with this presentation. First is the special ed ARA monies, what was received and where that's been spent or allocated. And secondly, go into more detail on the draft action plan that we presented at the last meeting. And we've plugged in some numbers. Now, keep in mind, please, that these numbers are fluid. As the committees meet and they see other priorities or the necessity to move some of these monies around, they can do that as long as we stay within the confines of that budget. So the first piece on the ARA monies, we received $1,225,246, of which roughly breaks out on that handout that you have entitled Accounting of Special Education ARA Funds. The vast majority that was received, that amount, $1,225,246, is for the secondary level. The elementary level, and it's got to do with numbers. Obviously, we have the 70-30 split, secondary being the largest. So we had $558,398 for the elementary level. From that, with the reorganization of the special education department, which included directors, program specialists, and support staff, we budgeted monies in there for certificated and classified salaries, and of course the benefits that go with those. And so you can see what the ending balance is at this point for secondary, which is somewhat substantial, but again, they got the lion's share of the money because of the larger district that it is. At the elementary level, same thing, because we have an elementary director, program specialist, and support staff as well. So those were expenditures that were included in the elementary. And so you see the remaining balance for the elementary as well. And this is money that we have allocated and will go into part 2 on the draft action plan and some of those dollar amounts. Any questions on the ARA funds, first of all?
Are we going to hear your report and then have public comment, or do you want to talk about these now before we hear public comment? Okay, Mrs. Deacon?
As I was looking over this first spreadsheet, or for lack of a better word, I have to confess I was having a little bit of trouble figuring out the numbers and the categories. For instance, under secondary classified salaries, budgeted 107,000, year-to-date actual nothing. Or am I reading that wrong?
No, that's correct.
So we haven't spent anything on classified salaries in secondary year-to-date?
Now, keep in mind that this is approximately, 9 or 10 days old, and I believe there was a board brief that came to you from Fiscal Services. That's the updated that you received in the board brief.
Oh, this is older than that?
It's still zero.
It's still zero. We have spent no money in classified salaries in the high school district.
Okay.
Most of the time, what we In the classified salaries, we try to put in 3310, which is the special education on the federal side, because we get a PERS reduction amount. It's a calculation on the revenue limit. So we try to put as much money in there so that we can get a more money back because of the PERS reduction. So even though we do have some in the elementary, we have not had any salaries taken out of the secondary as of today.
And nothing encumbered either, so do we not anticipate?
Salaries are only encumbered once something hits in them. So once we have salaries starting to hit in classified, then it encumbers it out through the remaining period of time. Since nothing is hit, nothing's encumbered.
I think that's an important thing the board should know, is that we have a payroll encumbering mechanism in our financial system. So like what Meg said, is once salaries are expensed in a specific month, then basically it will project or extrapolate through year end. That's a very good thing.
And on the back page here, all these.
Let's stick to this
Okay,
one
sure.
page first,
Okay.
yeah. There was one big number. I don't see it. So this is the current budget you're operating under?
Correct.
And what happens when we don't have any more, like ARA funds in the future?
Well, that's why we've tried to limit as much as possible in personnel. Obviously, there are some that are funded in there, but if you take a look, for example, the secondary, quite a bit in terms of books and supplies, because we wanted to support classroom teachers and their needs. So we've tried to increase those more into the 4s and 5,000s, because we're trying to limit, because we know that this money will be going away.
What did we spend 553,000 and books and supplies? What for special ed? What?
Well, we haven't yet.
Okay, we spent 34,000. Okay.
Right.
What are the plans to spend that much money?
That's, as we get into the draft action plan to figure that out, that plan itself, the way it sits right now with the placeholder figures, comes out to about $657,000. So that money we needed to earmark somewhere so that it was held in place while the FICMAT subgroups work through their action plans. So then it'll be, as I mentioned at the top of the conversation, be able to move some of those monies according to where that subgroup feels that the priorities are. So right now, it's a placeholder. It is something that is is flexible to be moved according to the needs of those groups.
Okay, do you want to go to this second, what is this second document?
What this is after consultation, we talked to the FICMAT stakeholders, prioritized some areas. Then Dr. Carol Miller and I sat down with Meg Jate. And so what this is, basically, it's kind of a thumbnail of what you will see in the actual draft action plan. So we went through and took a look at some of the priorities. For example, updated protocols for our speech-language pathologists, psychologists. The ombudsman is in there. Laptop for each school site so that they can take it to a portable, so there's more flexibility in terms of going to an IEP and be able to access SACE, and also wireless printers where they can actually take them to IEPs and do the IEP there on SACE online. So this is a cheat sheet, if you will, that will lead into the actual draft action plan and some of those figures.
Mrs. Cordero?
I'm sorry, I just want to ask a quick question. It's kind of the same question I think that Mr. Herron just asked. If you were giving this sheet a title, what would you call it?
I would
answer that. This is my worksheet. This is a working document that accidentally got sent to you guys. Now, if I knew that this was coming, I would have made it look a lot better than this and more, have more explanation on it. But this was just, Tom, Carol, and I sat down and put these numbers into the budget. And I thought that those numbers would appear here, and they do. So really what you need to do is, I think, is look at this action plan, and then you will tie the numbers directly into this sheet. You don't really even need this sheet.
Well, but doesn't this sheet provide a summary of what's anticipated in the action plan or the estimates in the action plan?
Yeah, but it does give a little bit more detail over here because these were my notes. I mean, I didn't even do spell check on them or anything, so I'm kind of embarrassed about it. But
the notes like 4XXX.
And yes, and those are the object codes. So, you know, most people don't know what the codes are, but I know what the codes are, and this was my internal document to get it in the budget correctly. So I apologize.
No, I wasn't. You know, I actually think the document could be very helpful. I mean, I wasn't criticizing it. I just wanted to make sure I understood exactly what it was showing us. So it's kind of an anticipated budget for.
These numbers are in your ARA budget right now.
Okay. Okay.
And now Tom will have these in the recommendations or the stakeholders' guide action plan. You'll see the same numbers in this plan.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
Mrs. Deacon?
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation because I also had a subhead question at the top of that. I think in the effort of full disclosure, too, it's important to say that the stakeholder group really didn't have any formalized, it mentions stakeholder input here. It wasn't really done in a formalized way in terms of tying dollars to specific expenditures, at least that's my recollection of it. I'm not saying that these aren't good ideas and good amounts, but I don't want the board to come away thinking that this was a list that was generated by the stakeholder group, because it really wasn't.
Well, it was presented at one stakeholder group, but there was a member that asked us to withdraw that. So we did.
I don't think it was as specific as I'm looking at right now.
Correct.
Okay.
But I just want to be clear that this is based on the stakeholder group priorities, the action plan.
This takes into account especially the areas on program services, basic things as, you know, protocols. I mean, that's a compliance. That's your baseline where you need to have the updated protocols for your speech language pathologists, your resource teachers and psychologists. So it takes that into account. takes into account professional development, which is a big ticket item. We ended up, I think, looking at about $100,000 for professional development for administrators, gen ed teachers, special ed teachers, instructional assistants. So it does hit those major areas that we talked about, where the 4 subgroups came out of: the programs and services, professional development. Communication is key. You'll see throughout here some additional resources for webmaster, for communications, brochures, and so forth. And so those priorities are reflected in this worksheet.
I guess my question is a very basic one. By us looking at this, what message does that send to you as far as what latitude you have to do these things? In other words, I look on here at $70,000 for a vehicle. I mean, by us looking at this and looking at the action plan, do you feel that you have authority just to go out and buy a $70,000 vehicle, or the ombudsman for $15,000? I mean, is that something that you feel the stakeholders, you now have authority to go out and hire an ombudsman for $15,000?
I don't feel on the first piece, I don't feel on the vehicle that I have the authority, because that was a recommendation that came up and there was some support for it, but it was not prioritized. Ombudsman had a higher priority, and it's something that we'll continue to work with. I know this morning in our organization subcommittee, the mention of ombudsman and what they could do with alternative dispute resolution, as well as avoiding us getting there, that position moved higher to the top than this vehicle did.
Yeah. My position on that was $15,000 won't buy you anything of the quality that I think you're talking about. I mean, I have an email from the FCMAT people saying that they think it's a $150,000 position. So I know that that's a high number, but I don't know who you could hire for $15,000 to. We're paying I guess we're paying the parent resource person, $19,000 or $20,000 plus benefits, and I would presume this person has to be a dramatically higher level person to do what everybody thinks that ombudsman should do. So I'm just curious, is how much you're going to depend on this? Is this just a document now that is moving through the system, and eventually the whole product will come back to us for approval?
I think we'll shed some more light on this as we go through the actual figures that are attached to the plan. And again, as I mentioned last month when I presented on the draft action plan, really the work begins now through those 4 groups that I mentioned. And as they work those out further in terms of what the actual plans are, what needs to be done first, what needs to be done second, the dollar amounts and so forth, that'll become clearer, and we can bring that back certainly at that point. Because we have another FCMAT, the large stakeholder group will meet a week from tomorrow. So the groups are continuing to meet regularly.
Mrs. Cordero?
I just wanted to follow up, I guess, a little bit on your comment, Mr. Heron, which is that maybe we should, rather than, asking Mr. Guajardo to take sort of, to decide what the next steps are going to be, maybe it would help if we gave him some direction on what we would like him to do with this. So if what we would like is to see a sort of a next stage of the budget or of the plan before it goes much further, it might be helpful to let him know that and tell him exactly what it is that we would like, so that he goes forward knowing what the board's will is. So, I mean, I was guessing from your questions that maybe there is a process that you would like him to follow.
I presume we'll have the action plan, rather than draft, we'll have an end product at a certain point that we say, okay, here's where we are now, let's adopt this and go forward. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting. Sorry about that. What I'm saying is, I think at some point I would expect the stakeholders to come with a final action plan. Oh.
Yeah.
Don't touch it. Okay. It's a long night. At some point, I would presume the stakeholders will come back to us and say, here is our action plan. And it will incorporate a lot of these things. And then if we approve that action plan, then you would have authority to go forward on a lot of these big things. I would presume a lot of little things are going forward quickly. But as far as some of the bigger items that might have some discourse here at this level, I hope we can see the difference in that. Yes.
Can I just follow up on that? Because I think it would be helpful probably for you to know what we're thinking along these lines. I mean, for me, a lot of these items I think are very good ideas, and probably what we need to do is break out and discuss them and come up with dollar figures that have maybe been researched a little bit more. I'm sure you can get a vehicle for less than $70,000, but you know, in terms of the ombudsman, I mean, there was at one point floated the idea that maybe we'd hire Carol Miller on a contract basis to come in twice a month, you know, so it might not end up being $150,000 a year. It could be considerably less than that. So what would be useful, I think, would be kind of a justification and description of these different items. And I guess there's some urgency here, too, because we need to spend the money. Again, we're paying interest on the money when we don't spend it. And so I know it's probably a lot to ask. I know the stakeholder group is meeting again in not next week. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be there. But at any rate, I think it would be really useful to have a justification for these, a more specific, maybe investigation of the dollar amounts. And that would be really helpful for us in giving guidance.
Mrs. Cordero?
Just lest the public think we're being really extravagant with the $70,000, vehicle. I'm not sure $70,000 is the amount that we need to be talking about, but we are talking about. I'm assuming we're talking about a vehicle that has to have the appropriate accommodations for disabled and severely disabled students. So it's not just a run-of-the-mill vehicle, which does make it significantly more expensive than what we might normally think we could buy, a vehicle for. So I just don't want the public to think we're spending extravagantly.
I think it's a great idea. I guess I wonder why a proposal hasn't come forward to say, hey, this is a great idea, the stakeholders group loves it, why don't we go ahead and buy it? There are some of these things that could be done piecemeal and get moving on it.
The vehicle is for wheelchair students, and the figure is not too far off. We contacted the county office, who just purchased 2 or 3 of them, and that's about the ballpark figure there. I think 2 things need to happen, because we do need to spend the money, and we need to spend it in areas of great need, in areas that we get input on. And I'll share that with a FCMAC group next week. But also, we are open, and that's why we brought it to you last month, and we are open if you have suggestions, directions, guidance. This would be the time, or if you want to follow up and email, call me. I'll be glad to entertain that as well, because I do think we need to get moving, because the year is coming quick, and we've got money budgeted out there. We want to make sure that it goes to the priority areas and not just get spent.
I think I need to interject here. These figures that you see on this one page are coming to you not because we just put them down on a sheet, but because they're tied to recommendations and they're tied to action plans. And at this point, they're only estimates. They haven't been thoroughly discussed. Some have been vetted. Most of them have been at least suggested. But they need a lot of filling out in terms of what these action plan items are, what's actually involved in delivering that item, and then costing out each of those elements. And there's a lot of work that still needs to be done here to really get a good target on these numbers. So while they're shown here on one sheet, the detail right now is in the FCMAT recommendations, and the detail in the future will be in the action plan that will come back to you with more detail, and that's going to take a lot of work to do.
Any others? Oh, yeah, public comment? Okay. Yes. Yes.
So we'll again have public comment for 2 minutes on this item, because we are significantly over schedule. Corey Breen, followed by Kathy Abarca, and the comments are closed at this point.
Good evening. With 2 minutes, I'm going to go fast. Mr. Guajardo, he wanted to end the stakeholders group, and now suddenly it appears to be a buffer for him that he's enjoying. I'm not happy with the wishy-washy kind of presentation from above. Definitely tried to end the program. Then, Ed, I think you made a couple comments that concern me. I miss work to go to the stakeholders group, and if we're meeting and none of our meeting means anything, then why am I missing work?
I didn't say that at all.
Good.
I mean, I didn't mean that at all.
Because it came
but-
out that way, and a lot of people
Yeah.
in the back cringed.
No. Okay.
So you might review that and maybe make an alteration. But if the board members aren't going to approve anything that the stakeholders do, which was implied, then we need more board members on that committee. That committee really can't go away. Why are we paying for Read 180 with special ed funds? Half our money was taken already. So first we get a lot of money, then you take half to supplement the general ed fund that we supposedly, quote, encroached on, another word that should be gone. But now you're paying for Read 180, but you already paid for school books, math books that our kids are never going to use. Anyone heard of Costco? Swine wipes? Are you kidding? $2,500? Who is this woman, Linda Still? And an ombudsman for $15,000? Thank you, Ed. You said it all. There's no one that's going to work for $15,000 that's going to do the job we need done. And who hired a resource parent without anyone else really coming into that? I thought we were going to be a transparent group kind of scenario where we actually talk and work on these things. Someone's hired. Oh my gosh. I'm just so disappointed. I keep thinking maybe I can cut back and I don't have to go to these meetings because it takes away from family time. As you saw, my daughter was here on her birthday. What a lovely birthday, a meeting with you all. And yet I don't think I can miss because of things that are happening like this. This is craziness that really needs public awareness. And I hope the public listens and makes some suggestions to you other than the 5 or 6 of us that show up all the time, because it's just craziness. Special ed has been behind
Ms.
in their
Brink.
funding for years.
Thank you. Kathy Abarca?
Good evening. I have been to every stakeholders meeting. I've been to every committee that I sit on. And I have a couple of things to clear up about the stakeholders. First of all, the numbers were originally asked to be taken out of the action plan because it wasn't a consensus. We didn't have any input at all on those numbers. And although we may agree or disagree, we asked Carol as a group to not include those on the action plan because they hadn't been discussed. So I think that there is a lot more discussion that needs to be done. I would like to know why we're not asking for more help from the SELPA for our training. I think $100,000 for training is a lot. I agree we need training, but the SELPA is supposed to be helping us with that. I think that could offset some of that. I believe we need the ombudsman desperately. I think they can do more than just try to stop litigation. I think they can prevent it. I think they can help us write our procedures manuals. I think they can help us legally do all the things that need to be done. And I just want to end by saying this, and this is going to echo what we talked about today at our organizational committee. You all have no idea how big this is that needs to be done. We are building things for a foundation, for a special ed department that has never been in place. And what we do now is going to affect our students and our children for the next 25, 30 years. So we need to be very, very
30 seconds.
careful, and we need to make sure that we develop a really, really thorough plan so that we don't forget anything, that we do it legally, and that we stay within the laws, and that we look to the best interests and what is the most best practices for our children. Those are the most important things. But today we saw how absolutely complex this all is going to be, and it's going to take time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to comment. In no way did I disparage the stakeholders. My comment was 3 of us haven't been a part of that, but yet the 5 of us have to vote on whatever takes place. And I'm not going to advocate that vote to the stakeholders. You know, I will listen intently, but I still have to sit up here and analyze every single item to determine whether or not I think it's the correct approach to take. And I would hope each board member would have that same approach. I mean, the example would be the ombudsman. I don't think it can be done for 15,000. So I'm not going to accept that recommendation. Psychologists, it's nice to say, don't do it, but FCMAT says do it, and yet I need to know why. Why is there a discrepancy? So I need to be convinced across the board on a lot of things, but I admire the stakeholders for what they've done dramatically. It's fantastic, but I didn't mean any negative consequence in any of the statements I made, and I apologize if I did. Anything else on this item? Well, on the Read 180, I looked at the textbooks. Yeah, okay. I looked at the textbooks at the school, and they're specifically to be used for special ed students. So the ones we purchased. Yeah, and I physically went to Harding School and looked at them. One other thing for Tom. I got in my mailbox the list of things that aren't part of the priority action plan, not part of the action plan. But did that get publicly dispersed? It just appeared in my mailbox.
That was at a board member's request. I can distribute it to
No,
whoever
I
would like.
That's my question. Did I get it? Did everybody get it? Did the public get it?
It was a board member request and it was distributed to the board, to the superintendent.
We'll see that it gets in the board brief. I thought that it was, but we'll make sure. I'm pretty sure.
Well, I just got it in my mailbox here. I didn't get it in a board brief or public. It's not on, it wasn't in digital work.
Well, I think we all got it.
Well, yeah, no,
Okay.
it wasn't board brief.
We can make sure we do that.
Those are items not included in the action plan, right?
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, no other questions on that? We'll go to, we're going to bypass a break, and we'll go to E4, report on state of school facilities.
Well, our previous discussion on cutting back on deferred maintenance sort of highlights or heightens this need. Dave Hetyunk has been asked to give a report on the state of our school facilities. Dave?
Thank you, Dr. Sarvis. I'm going to start by telling you that we have some great facilities. We've passed 3 bond issues. We've done a lot of work. I'm proud of that work. A lot of great projects. Some were more challenging than others. Of course, some were more successful than others. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And of course, there's also, maintaining those facilities we talked about earlier. I wanted to start with resubmitting the report that's in the agenda item, which was kind of a snapshot in time in 2006, and then look at a couple things on kind of what's on that report and what that report doesn't say. And so, because Adams is first on the report, I'm going to pick on Adams a little bit. We spent some money on Adams that you'll never see, the electrical infrastructure. Adams is one of those schools that when it came time for the modernization, we were short of funds and we did the ADA work and left a lot of things out. At Adams, we have classrooms that are in dire need of some modernization. We have the need for a new library. We have asphalt issues that I'll show you some pictures of in a little bit. We have drainage issues, if you've been to that site, around the kindergarten areas and some of the outdoor teaching areas, where you see sandbags there for those of you who visit. We have some older portables that need replacement, and we have a multi-purpose room that definitely needs modernization. And then you look at the list that the engineers did, where they're looking through some things at a different eye. They may not be looking at things that are aesthetically like new ceilings or new lighting, as long as the lighting may be energy efficient, may not be energy efficient. Some people are looking through things in a different eyes, and when I walk through a site, I may look at things different than board members. And so what I've done is I've talked with Mr. Smith, Dr. Sarvis, and Robin Sawaski, and I've tentatively put together, if we ever did go out and have additional funds, what would be some priority projects from the facilities department. I put those together and we've distributed them to the principals and says, give me your ideas. And I'd like to put those in a board brief this Friday for you, once we talk about them, hopefully in cabinet tomorrow, go through the list. These are, different projects for different schools. And so, like I say, you get to the numbers 15 through 18, and that's when some design professionals or maintenance personnel were out on some of these surveys. Our project managers that we had for the district, Mr. Winiger, Mr. Mayrose, they were instrumental in putting this together. And then I see one of our district electricians here, and earlier, Mr. Herron, you asked a question about what wouldn't get done. Let me give you a quick example. We got a call from La Cumbre Middle School saying that they had computers in their lab that it's tripping the breaker all day. The kids can't work. They can't get their work done. Well, sent the electrician out, which we happened to have available at the time, and they determined that somebody had rearranged the plugs in the outlets, and so they had too many on one circuit because the people in the classroom weren't aware of which rows of outlets were on which circuits. In a short time, that lab was up and running and put back together. And I use that as an example. That lab is there because of the district had money to add computer labs, to modernize that area during bond funds. And I know we did a lot of additional labs with Read 180. We've done a lot of work, but unfortunately, we have a lot of work to go. Let me just here a second. This is a roof at Goleta Valley Junior High. This is what it looks like. Of course, this is a little bit grainy, but this is what it looks like after rain. There's water standing on that roof. That's not a good situation. That roof has over the years deteriorated. It doesn't drain. It's had many penetrations added. You see conduits on the roof. You see heating ventilation equipment on the roof. See if I can increase this one a little bit. And let me see if I can get this started here. Just at Adams Elementary, just a couple things, ceilings. Some things look real good in pictures, but for those of you who visit sites, here's a restroom that's been some ADA enhancements, so you have 3 different types of flooring in this restroom. You have different types of tile. Just not real aesthetically pleasing, and a lot of that tile is old. Just some old heating equipment. Here you have some old tile, probably contains asbestos. The painters were painting that day, and then you look at the condition of this column. Things need some modernizing. We have high ceilings with some old type light fixtures with some previous roof leaks that we just to state of some of the finishes. I think here, just a typical old style light fixture doesn't really put out that much light. Again, just the small things that you'd see when you go through. MP room stage, there's some finishes that need some updating. Those curtains are probably pretty old, and their fire rating may not be all the way up to date. Here's remember, we used to have all the floor urinals, which now you get rid of for health reasons. Well, there's one that we've covered up. There's one that's still working, and then there's one new one, all side by side. That we've gone through and added taken away probably a fixture to make the stall large enough for an ADA toilet, but we didn't have the money to go through and modernize that whole restroom. So that's the type of thing you'll look at. Again, different generations of sinks for accessibility. Just the condition of again, 2 different types of floor tile. In need of lighting and ceiling renovations. Here at Dos Pueblos is the road behind the cafeteria. Just some condition of asphalt. If you look at this next one, this really doesn't show the age and condition
of some of the heating equipment, but there's some things out there that are fairly old. We talked about the heating system at Dos Pueblos. Just look at, you can't tell that it's not working or working, but just look at the state and the age of some of this equipment on the roof that, really needs to be replaced. This is what we're facing. Here is the faculty parking lot at Dos Pueblos. I was out there this morning in the rain for a Safe Routes to School meeting. Dr. Sarvis decided it would better be me than him, so that's a good decision on his part.
Thank you.
But these are the types of things that we're just behind on. Again, just types of old type systems. This is probably Franklin. The picture looks pretty good, but if you go out to Franklin and you look at those restrooms off the multi-purpose room, they're really in dire need of renovation, and so is that multi-purpose room, just like Adams and a few others. Just conditions, I mean, the lighting is terrible in that restroom. Ceilings over the years have changed different ways. Again, just the condition of some systems. We all know at Franklin and Cleveland, both those schools, those MP rooms, those lights are old, especially Franklin. You hear that humming noise when you're in there. So again, just a few pictures to show you that, yeah, we really have some work that needs to be done in our facilities. But then again, when you go out there and look at the areas that have been renovated with Measure V, with I-98, with Measure R that rebuilt Roosevelt, there's some fantastic looking rooms at all of our sites. But there's also some rooms that need to be addressed, and a lot of things that did not get done because we ran short of funds, whether they were over encumbered, our lawsuit settlement, the change in the requirement for the amount of money we need to spend on ADA upgrades through Division of State Architect and other requirements. And again, we had that big jump in inflation and construction costs that everybody experienced. And so we'd like to furnish you with a list of proposed projects and come back and speak to you. There's been discussions on things like, in general across the district, like photovoltaics, finding some ways to do some green projects to save some money on energy costs in the future. We talked about our maintenance department, Dos Pueblos, the heating system. Just upgrading that would take a great deal of time and energy that they could spend on other areas of heating and ventilation. The thing is, you get new systems, if you don't maintain those new systems, they're going to deteriorate faster, along with the systems you have that are deteriorating. And unfortunately, right now, developer fee money is down because building permits are down. Deferred maintenance money is less because the state is not making their 100% of their half. They're only sending us 70%, and then they're not requiring the districts to match those funds, and we're not matching that funds as part of our fiscal solvency plan. So I'd be more than happy after you get the list in the board brief to discuss any school or anything that board members may have a set of priorities that they'd like to see addressed. I know we had a couple principals that says, playground equipment is big on our minds because there's no real funds to replace that equipment. Some of it must be removed because it's not handicap accessible. And in these financial times, typically playground equipment has been fundraising, and fundraising is getting harder to do every year.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Young? Mrs. Parker?
Well, lots of comments on it. I would love to see the district put into figure out some way to do both a long-term, 10-year replacement fund for playgrounds. I mean, I do think it's our responsibility, and yet we foist that on the PTAs and PTOs again and again. And also for furniture replacement, which, we haven't even looked at that. There's never any money to buy the new furniture, and yet some of the classrooms, it's dire. I remember, I think it was 8 years ago, in the local assembly race, there was a scandal because one of the people that was running used photographs of crumbling school facility structures, and saying, because there was a former school board member that was running, and the scandal was that it turned out that in fact they were using pictures from like LA Unified. It wasn't our district. But I remember at the time when they said that it wasn't the Santa Barbara School District, and I remember I was thinking, well, they haven't been I could have taken the pictures for them. I've seen it. And it's only worse now than it was 8 years ago because we were right in the middle of having bond funding. And what I've seen is that it's just over the years become more and more difficult to maintain things holistically. And you'll have Dos Pueblos that had their priority was to complete their campus. They have a gorgeous theater, a beautiful pool, and a parking lot that you could take a snapshot of and use as, this is a third world school's parking lot. And we have that all over the district at this point. At almost every school site, you could take photographs where somebody could say, this looks like an inner urban district that has no money. And we haven't been spending money on the facilities that we need to, and the money isn't there. And so I would definitely like to hear more about funding mechanisms to try to take this on, because I feel like it's not fair to our students and it's not fair to our community to have schools that are in this state. It's an embarrassment.
And we can talk about different strategies at that time in a public forum and tax rates and how they may or may not be affected and what could happen there. And yeah, I heard about that parking lot during the Safe Routes to School meeting this morning. We were out walking the perimeter, and there was plenty of comments on the state of the asphalt.
Yeah. Other
Directed
comments?
toward me.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Would
Tried
the
to keep
board
that
like
brief because of the time.
Would the board like to hear a discussion about the possibility of bond funding?
I think that'd be a good thing to put on the agenda. I know you have a meeting of your Measure V bond group, tomorrow night?
Third Wednesday. I think it's next Wednesday of next week.
Wednesday of next week.
Coming up soon.
Right.
So maybe that group can bring back some recommendations.
It's on their agenda to discuss if they wish.
Okay. Yeah, obviously, I think we need to look at all aspects of how we can take care of this. I think all of us, when we wander through the schools, we see this day after day. It's just not good.
Oh, no, I would just agree. I think the time is right for us to look at this, because I think in this economic climate, we in fact might be able to do things less expensively than we were able to a couple of years ago when things were really prohibitive. And so I absolutely want to look at some ideas.
Construction costs are down right now, and hopefully they'll stay that way for a little while for our behalf.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, Mrs. Cordero?
I just wanted to comment also that we have some schools in our district are, really gorgeous buildings from a long time ago. And if we don't maintain them, we will lose them, because the cost to restore them to what they originally were would be prohibitive because of the kind of architecture, et cetera, that they had, tile, et cetera, that they have. So I'm wondering if there's any way to, any grants or funding sources that might be used for trying to maintain. For example, Santa Barbara High School was declared a historical landmark.
Right.
I'm wondering if there's any kind, and is Santa Barbara Junior High
Yes,
has
we
that
have-
designation as well?
We have designated landmarks, Santa Barbara Junior High, the main building at Santa Barbara High School, La Cumbre, and McKinley.
Okay.
And we have some other beautiful buildings, like Peabody, that aren't historic landmarks, but yes, and your comments are very true. It would be almost cost prohibitive to duplicate that type of architecture if you could find the craftsmen that did that type of work in today's date. I mean, a lot of those types of people that did that type of work are very hard to find nowadays, and they're beautiful, beautiful buildings. And you'll see on the list that we're talking about exterior paint and windows and things like that for these buildings like Santa Barbara High School in La Cumbre.
Okay,
And
thank you.
We recently painted McKinley, so if you, with deferred maintenance funds, and if you have a chance to go by there and look at that project, along with the sewer work that's going on. but I think that paint job just turned out beautiful. It really enhances the building, and most importantly, it'll protect the building.
Yeah, I did go by Washington this weekend, and they do have a new bathroom on site, so we're moving forward on Washington. Okay. Okay. Now we go to E5. Dr. Hayden, you'd be happy to know that Dr. Sarvis wanted to give you a report badly last week, or last meeting, but everybody insisted, no, we want you. So we're going to do it.
This is a big surprise to Davis.
Yeah, so we weren't. Is this guy on? Yes, it is. Which do you wish first, the AP or the SAT?
Advanced placement.
AP.
This is Davis Hayden, our Director of Research, Evaluation, and Technology on advanced placement exam results.
Well, you all know what APs are. They're the advanced placement courses and tests that our students take. If they take the test and score 3 or above, they can get credit at many colleges around the nation. And so this is similar to the report I gave last year, and the numbers really haven't changed a heck of a lot, so you just need to know that. Altogether, we had an increase of number of students taking the AP test, and we had an increase in number of subjects. So there's a slight increase in number of subjects, number of students taking the test, and the number of students passing and getting credit for college. So we're actually doing quite well. If you look at this number down, let's see if I can remember how to do this. Down here, the average is only 10 throughout the nation. AP course is at high schools, and we have 16, 16, and 25. So our schools are doing a great job in terms of the numbers of AP exams and AP courses. So we'll go to the next slide. This is a huge number of students taking AP exams, 57% being passed, and we had 73%. So once again, our students are not only taking a lot of AP courses and exams, but they're passing them. One of the problems we have, though, is that, and this is kind of a plus minus, in the state of California, 30% of those tested are Latino, whereas we only have 17.8% testing that are Latino. So we're considerably behind in a number of Latinos taking AP test. On the other hand, the Latinos that are taking the AP test are passing at a very high rate. So whereas in the state of California, they're not. So it's kind of a plus minus. I suspect we should have more Latinos taking AP exams. That would probably mean that this would drop down, but that's probably better than the other way around. We saw a 33% increase, though, of test takers in 08-09 from 07-08, so we are moving in the right direction. And this is just some more statistics. Okay, this is why I say it's pretty much continuing. This is a year-long, this is year after year after year, and we can see that San Marcos is pretty steady over the last 10 years or so. It has its high point last year, though, which is 290. Same thing down here for Latinos. It has its high point last year at 56. Dos Pueblos has done the stellar job of almost going up every year and is at the highest in the district at 548 students. This is the AP test, by the way, not courses, AP test. And Santa Barbara rose almost and actually beat DP one year, but has dropped a little bit. So in general, this is still more testing than in the past, okay, and more Latinos testing than in the past. If we go to the historical view of historical view, it's getting late, you guys. We can see here the test taken, test passed, and this is then the test taken, test passed. And once again, some steady numbers from DP, kind of leveling off and dropping from Santa Barbara, and pretty much the same thing from San Marcos. And here's the Latino numbers, and you all have these packets, so you can study these in more depth if you wish to. And once again, DP going up, San Marcos going up, but staying pretty level in number of tests passed, and Santa Barbara sort of going down, but not much. This is another view of it. I mean, you can look at this data in many different ways. And in this here we have San Marcos, courses taken, AP tests, 3, 4, or 5. It all makes quite a bit of sense. This here is duplicated students included. So there, a student could have taken 4 courses and taken 3 tests and passed 1. So that's how this goes. And here's Santa Barbara, and here's DP. DP being the most, and the most here, and the most here. Of course, DP is our largest school at this point in time, so that also makes sense. This is non-duplicated. It's pretty much this. It kind of looks the same. This is grade 10 through 12 enrollment. And this is now individual students. So if we had just individual students, so a student here could have taken 5 courses, but they're only counted once. Okay. You get a similar picture for all of this, but this is, so this will not exceed the number of students at the school. This is the actual school enrollment for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And then this is the number of students. This is much closer, and that's because the students will usually take 1 test. They may have 3 tests that they're taking, but they may pass 1 of them. So, okay, this is just the grade levels, 9, 10, 11, and 12, and you can see that for APs, grade 11 and 12 is the dominant place that the students are taking these tests. This is courses, and then this is tests. If there was anything that be done, I guess it would be nice if we had more students actually taking the test. The same number taking the courses as took the test, but that doesn't happen. This is the same as the last one, but now broken out by every single AP test. I believe these are tests. Yes, these are the tests. You can see that some of them are the course taken and the test. Some of them have huge differences. U.S. history, world history, and these over here. So, you know, if there was any effort by the schools to try and improve upon the number of tests taken versus the number of course taken, these are the 5 that would have the most gain in terms of more students getting 3, 4s, and 5 and getting college credit. There's 2 graphs here, and they're a little confusing. This one here is the Latino and white enrollment, and the percent of that enrollment taking AP exams. So 6.3% of the Latino enrollment is taking AP exams, whereas 22.7% of the white enrollment is taking AP exams. This is pretty much identical across all of the schools, and it's between 6 and 10%. So all the schools are very similar, with Dos Pueblos having a higher number of within the Latino group taking AP exams compared to the other. This next one, though, is of the population, and so it's only 2.9% of the population versus 10. So that's the total population of the school. It's a little bit different way of looking at it. This is the ethnic distribution by courses taken, and it's the same thing. Latinos are taken relatively few of the courses, and a white population has taken the vast majority of the courses. And like I say, this data has not really changed it very much from the preceding 5 or so years. AP English. Okay, I picked out a few courses. This makes, to some extent, the Latino students may be shying away from taking AP English because of the language issue. And if you see math, that doesn't make sense. But then this does make sense, that the Latino students are taking more of the AP Spanish. I think the one that doesn't make sense, if I can go back, is this one, that we have so many white students taking the AP math courses over the Latino students. And that's it for the AP report. Lots of data here. We're now getting reports from, well, this is just extra data. We're getting reports from, what's the name of the company?
College Board?
College Board, yeah. We're getting really detailed reports from College Board now. And they're going to make, I've included some of that data in here, but they're giving us a data disk that has just hundreds of graphs and charts on it. I don't know what to do with all the data, but they're giving it to the schools too. So we're getting lots of data back, but this is the primary data I think that you might be interested in terms of how are the ethnicities doing on the AP exams, and how are we doing overall on the AP exams? Are there any questions?
Mrs. Deacon?
Well, I didn't want to ask you to do extra work, but so I'm wondering if on that data disk they break out schools by scores. In other words, biology classes, AP bio classes at all 3 high schools are is one school have students scoring more 4s and 5s, where another school has students scoring 3s?
We could do that, but I think we already saw that earlier with the pattern of courses taken, exams taken, and 3, 4s, and 5s. And I think you saw that the pattern was almost identical at the 3 schools. Yes, I suspect there may be a school here that maybe has a biology teacher that's better than the biology teacher at another school, and then maybe that other school has a chemistry teacher that's better. We could probably get into that if you wish to, but then we're starting to look at probably individual teachers and how good they are. So that could get a little sticky. But we could do that
Well,
if
I
we
mean,
wanted to.
in a lot of ways, this data is only valuable if we use it in some way, really, you know. And I don't know if we want to look at it necessarily as a marker of good teaching, but I think it gives us some information that's helpful. The other thing that I think is important to consider is that a lot of the colleges don't give you college credit unless you score a 4 or a 5 on the test.
Actually, you're right. 3, 4, and 5 for some colleges, 4 and 5 for others, 5 for some.
Right.
Some colleges will give you 2 years of credit if you get a 5, and some won't give you but maybe 1 semester if you get a 5. The colleges all have their own way of interpreting those scores.
Right. And here's just one interesting factoid. If you're a UC student and you want to go to a med school in the UC system, they do not count AP, biochemistry, and physics taken in high school. So you have to retake those. And my son found that out the hard way because he took AP classes and got credit for them, went right into more advanced classes, and then didn't necessarily have the beginning lab classes in college. I mean, it was all fine in the end, but that's something that we should counsel our students about because they may not know that.
Well, the counselors get a lot of this information directly. They actually get the disc directly. Each of the school gets their own disc. So I'm hoping that the counselors are using this data that they have access to.
Mrs. Parker?
I was glad that you brought up the point about the site's overall enrollment because I actually think that in terms of number of students looking at when we're looking at the trend over the years, probably the most impressive high school is San Marcos because their enrollment has been dropping so significantly over the past 4 or 5 years. And to see that they're at least holding steady in the number of students probably means that percentage-wise that's going up. I feel like I love getting this report. It's sort of a snapshot. But I'm always interested in hearing, the plan in terms of how are we going to move more students in, and how are they going to get supported, and this is interesting data, but how do we use it? Yeah.
Mrs. Cordero?
Well, for me, the question always is, what are the invisible barriers that are keeping people out? And I'm assuming they're invisible because I think we've tried really hard to break down any that we can see. So I guess I'm with Ms. Parker. I want to know what are we going to do with this information? And that's really probably not a question for you, Dr. Hayden, as much as it is a question for Dr. Sarvis and for Ms. Waske. How are we going to address this? And there are some, like, for example, the issue about the students taking the test. I always have mixed feelings about that, because on the one hand, it benefits the students if they score at the appropriate level to get college credit, although as we see, it may not always have the ultimate benefit that they think it's going to. But in many ways, I think that's something that we do in order to benefit the schools, because it helps our percentages to have students, doing that. So that issue I'm always a little bit have mixed feelings about. But getting students into the classes so that then they can choose whether they take the test or not. But at least they've got the education, they've got the learning that is taking place. That's where I'm always interested in making sure that we improve. And I don't mean to suggest that there isn't valid reasons for improving in the test taking as well. But I think the first step is always getting them into the class. So I guess I would like to know, do we have a plan for that? Is it?
Well, part of it is what we talked about with the board focus goal, because that's a specific goal to get more students in those advanced courses. So there are some things, that we listed in the action plan, which we're building on. Certainly our AVID courses that are starting, elementary, junior high, we're adding more of those. There's a specific AVID plan that we have to put together every year to submit to AVID to be, what do they call it, certified district or an AVID, whatever. Yeah, AVID district. And it's very clear about increasing those classes and what those classes do. So that's one very formalized way that we're working. And then, of course, part of our proposal that we're working through on not using GATE as a title for our highest level courses, so that we will have students feel like they can take that course when they truly are those advanced learners, they meet the criteria. That's another way we do it. I think that point you bring up about the percentage of students actually taking the courses versus taking the test and passing it, that's something we really need to discuss even more. I mean, the board focus goal is clear. We want more students in there. And yet schools, counselors hesitate to put students in there sometimes that they think maybe won't be successful on the test or as successful in the class. Districts who have pushed and just put a lot of kids in there. There's a particular one I remember hearing about, and I heard them talk from San Diego County. They said that the increase in students was phenomenal when they started just putting kids in. The test rate, of course, goes down as far as passing, but it eventually, after about 3 or 4 years, started going up. And their whole intent was to get students in those classes, to let them know what it felt like to be in college-level courses and know that they could do it. So they put a lot of support in so that they were successful, and then they just started taking more and more classes, starting like in sophomore year where they, so by their senior year, they're feeling very comfortable, and then they're successful in college. So that conversation, we have to have more of that. Dr. Sarvis may need to add more.
One of the things you saw in the number of students taking the test versus number of students passing the test, generally you get more test takers, you get more students passing tests. And in those programs that have insisted that all students take the test, where teachers' messages and expectations to students are very clear. I expect everyone in this class to be ready to take this test, and I will help get you to that point. Do experience tremendous growth in number of passing exams, and as it turns out, growth in the number of higher score exams. I mean, I think it really does make a difference. In fact, I would like to identify outliers. I don't want to be very public about it, but those that really do produce a lot of 4s and 5s, because there are classes that actually do that.
I will add, though, that on a positive note and a negative at the same time, is that we actually have a lot of courses and a lot of students taking those courses in our district, so we're at a pretty high level. The only negative of that is that it's not very many Latino students doing it. So that is
Is the cost of the test a barrier to Latinos taking the test?
Not really. Most of the cost for these tests, they're subsidized in some way or form. There is monies for them. Do you know the exact amount, Robin?
Gosh, didn't it used to be
I lost-
$80 or something like that?
Lost track at 74.
Well,
But no, that there is the
if you pay
schools.
full price, it was 80 or 90. But I know that for economic, if you can prove economic need,
Right.
I think it's waived or it's $20.
I think it's down to like $15 or
Is it-
something
yeah,
like that, right?
It's affordable.
So that is not.
I just wonder if it's a barrier. So
It may be a small barrier, but it's not a large one.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you very much for that report. We'll go to E6, report on Scholastic Aptitude Test, SAT, for the 2008-2009 school year.
I'd like to introduce Davis Hayden.
Okay, you guys. Oh, we have one person. Glad to have you here. Okay. So I noticed that one of the board focus goals was to include the PSAT in the future. We have not actually purchased the PSAT in the past, and so as a district data disk, and we went ahead and have ordered it. So we'll be including the PSAT in the future tests. College Board is also sending us a lot of data on these tests. So and it helped me present this report. It's got the basic cost. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. It's got the basic cost listed in here. And the SAT reasoning, there's some controversy about this, by the way, because I know that the UC systems I think that they don't actually use the SAT reasoning anymore. I believe that's correct. I'm not 100%. I know they were talking about not using the SAT reasoning test any longer. So there is some controversy about taking it or not taking it, and a lot of students are now taking the ACT. And so we have also decided this year, because of the board focus request for the ACT, to include the ACT as a purchase by the district so we can get the data disk for the ACT test exam. A lot of this information is from DataQuest, and it's because that way it's consistent from year to year to year to year, because it goes back quite a few years. That's the CDE, Department of Education for the California. So this is number of SAT test takers in grade 12. We actually have test takers in other grades, quite a few other grades, but grade 12 is what DataQuest reports on, and so it gives you a pretty good picture of test taking. And you can see that it varies all over. A drop for 2 of our schools in the last couple of years, and with DP still having quite a few test takers.
Davis, to add clarification to what you just said, the College Board used to hang on to the tests until each student was a 12th grader, then give the report to the district for their 12th grade class, even though students took the test in 11th grade and 10th grade.
Oh.
Is that the data that's shown on DataQuest here?
Well, DataQuest reports 12th grade only. No, this is only 12th graders.
Then I assume that that's based on whenever they took the test.
It actually has the year of the test.
Because College Board
okay.
does ask the student their graduating year, and then they compile all of those results for that year.
I'll check in on that. It may and it may not, but historically, that's an interesting thing to know about. I didn't know that. Okay, so I'll check to see if this is just 12th graders or if it's any test the kid took up to and including 12th grade. Okay. And this is just a percent of 12th graders that took a test. So this just does the percent. We got in here the county and the state levels. And so you can see that, once again, just like with the AP exams, we're having quite a few more students taking the SAT than either the county or the state. Now, you got to remember, the county's got our numbers thrown into it. So if you were to take the county and subtract Santa Barbara, it would probably be much more parallel to the state numbers. Okay? So that means that we're actually having a good percentage of our students taking the SAT at each of the 3 high schools. Once again, our students are scoring quite high in comparison to the county and the state. And once again, if you took our scores out, the county would be much more down here. So our students are not only taking more SAT exams, which should lower their scores, but it's not. They're actually getting very high scores on the SAT exam. And this is the math. The drop here, I don't understand that, but there are some pretty big swings here, so this could just be a swing. It might swing back up the next year. If we saw this a couple of years in a row, I'd worry, but I'm not too worried at this point in time. Go to the next one. And writing has only been around for since 2005-06, so this is the 3rd test, and once again, the same pattern that we see in the others. And then this is the combined pattern. This is by ethnicity, and this is percent over here. So we can see that we have most of the students are white students, and the numbers have remained almost steady. They've remained very steady, these percents, over multiple years. So it seems to be pretty fixed in terms of the number of students taking these exams. Hasn't changed much. This is the verbal average by ethnicity. This is much closer to the state average. And the math average by ethnicity, and then the writing average by ethnicity. Once again, in general, pretty much the same scores over the last 4 years. They haven't changed. And that's the combined. This I think this is the, yeah, it's shown here. This is the table from 07, 08 to 08, 09, showing all of the subject tests and the changes in them. And then this is the a graph of it. And you can see that number of students taking subject tests in 2008-09, the largest one being literature, subject test in literature, English literature, is 341 students taking that subject test. But there's a lot of subject tests that we're giving. And average scores on the subject test. And these are pretty decent scores. Once again, 500 would be considered, pretty much every one of these has 500 as the mean that they're trying to standardize it around. And so, except for German, I did not give scores when there was only 2 or 3 students. So there has to be 5 or more students for me to have given a score here. This is a very strong score in physics. Okay, so our physics students are doing really well in terms of the subject test. That's it. That physics subject test is 2 standard deviations above, so I mean that's pretty good for an average. Any questions?
Mrs. Deacon, any? No? Okay. Mrs. Parker?
No, thank you.
All right. Welcome back, and I'm glad we got to you. Okay. We did not have any consent items to talk about on F. G, coming events, you had a lot, and we have an agenda of them. Are there any more to announce?
No, I don't have others to announce.
Any future agenda items?
May I note that We are expecting action on the budget reductions at our next meeting, which is in 2 weeks on the 23rd. And we're expecting a special meeting on March 2nd, which is an intervening Tuesday. And that will also be, what, 6 o'clock? Was that the time?
Yes, I think so,
Okay.
Patricia. I would like to comment that, you know, we did start at 6 and we're done by 10:20, which
Well, we,
part of my effort was to see if we moved an hour earlier, could we finish on what our expected time is? And so we did very good. So we'll try it again next week and maybe give some thought as to, I don't know what the procedure is, but changing our time to start at 6 to be out of here at a decent hour. Because otherwise we'd be sitting here at 11:20.
Right, or we could also work on, in compressing what we do in a shorter amount of time, because we're just extending it by another hour by coming earlier, which is, I agree coming earlier is good, but we've just added an hour to our meetings.
Right, but we didn't really add an hour because, well, we would have been till 11:30. You know, if our goal is to get out by 10:30, and I think everybody has tried ways to condense it, but when you have public talking, you really. Okay.
Maybe, I'm sorry, maybe we should put at some point on our agenda, and I don't necessarily think it needs to be soon, this, a discussion again about how we want to organize our meetings, in terms of how whether or not we adhere to timelines, et cetera. For example, one way to run a meeting is if you go over on one
Should we be
agenda
talking
item.
about this at?
Well, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
this
okay.
is what I'd like to have as an
Okay.
agenda item.
Agenda item, okay.
Because we could choose to say, if we go over on this one, we have to subtract from this one. Or we could choose to continue the way that we are, which is just sort of taking as long as it takes. So anyways, I'd like to see that as an agenda item.
In March or April.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be soon.
Yeah, right. Anybody else? Let's close this meeting at 10:20.